Ministry of Energy and Minerals for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. I'd ask that we go around the table and have ministers introduce themselves, members introduce themselves for the record. Minister, please introduce the officials who are joining you. My name is Garth Rosal. I'm the MLA for Vermilion Lloydminster Wainwright and Chair of the committee. We will begin starting to my right.
Jackie Armstrong Hominick, MLA for Saskatchewan Diggerville.
Nolan Dick, MLA for Grand Prairie.
Scott Sinclair, MLA for Lesser Slave Lake.
Miles McDougall, MLA for Calgary Fish Creek.
Grant Hunter, MLA for Tabor Warner.
Jennifer Johnson, MLA for Lacombe Panoka.
Brian Jean, Minister of Energy and Minerals, and to my right is Larry Kalmeyer, Deputy Minister, and Roxanne LeBlanc, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Finance, who are joining me today.
Kyle Kozowski, MLA for Sherwood Park.
Najwan Al-Junaid, MLA for Calgary Glenmore.
Marlon Schmidt, Edmonton Gold Bar.
Warren Huffman, Committee Clerk.
Okay. And we would typically go to see who's online, but no one's there, so we don't need any introductions. And there's no substitutions today. So a few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of the meeting can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Members participating remotely are encouraged to turn on your camera when you're speaking and mute your microphone or not. Remote participants who wish to be placed on the speakers list, that there are none, so I'll skip that part. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. Speaking rotation and time limits. Honorable members, the main estimates for the Ministry of Energy and Minerals shall be considered for 3 hours. Standing Order 59.01 sets out the process for consideration of the main estimates in legislative policy committees. Suborder 59.016 sets out the speaking rotations for this meeting. The speaking rotation chart is available on the committee's internal website, and hard copies have been provided to the ministry officials at the table. For each segment of the meeting, blocks of speaking time will be combined only if both the minister and the member speaking agree. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the main estimates schedule, and the committee will adjourn. Should members have any questions regarding speaking times or rotation, please email or message the committee clerk about the process. With the concurrence of the committee, I will call a 5-minute break near the midpoint of the meeting. However, the 3-hour clock will continue to run. Does anyone oppose having a break? Okay. Ministry officials who are present may, at the discretion of the minister, address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to the microphone in the gallery, right over there, area, and are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to commenting. Pages are available to deliver notes or other materials between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery may not approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise. The individual speaking times will be paused. However, the block of speaking time and the overall 3-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written materials provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the minister in the assembly for the benefit of all members. Finally, the committee should have the opportunity to hear both questions and answers without interruption during estimate debate. Debate flows through the chair at all times, including instances when speaking time is shared between the member and the minister. I would now invite the Minister of Energy and Materials to begin your opening remarks. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. And thank you to not just the folks at the table, but also the folks behind me, which represent a ton of knowledge in the department and are here to answer your questions on the different files. In my political life as an MP and an MLA and a longtime resident in Fort McMurray, I have a deep understanding of the energy industry, its significance to my region, and its importance to many other communities across our great province. Energy development in Alberta is the key driver of the economy. Directly and indirectly, it is the single largest contributor to provincial GDP, income, employment, and government revenues. Resource royalties generate the largest share of the Alberta government's revenue stream and help fund important programs like health, education, and social services, the things that are really important to Albertans and that we all rely on. And as a revenue-generating ministry, we understand the importance of prudent spending. So I want to provide with you an overview of how my department is wisely spending its 2024 budget allocation to fulfill our mandate and support the responsible development of Alberta's energy and mineral resources. Budget 2024 is a commitment to the future viability of our energy and minerals industries, one that supports diversification as we transition on to a path to carbon neutrality. I want to draw your attention to the name of the ministry as it was changed to reflect minerals in June of 2023. This was deliberate, and it reflects the ministry's mandate and the evolving priorities of our province, including critical minerals which are needed to produce things like batteries for cell phones, energy storage cells for electric vehicles, and other products that are now required for a low-carbon world. This ministry has taken on some very large, new, and complex files, like energy transition, the working tables with the federal government, development of the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program, small modular reactors framework, and, of course, critical minerals. With a $65 million increase over the last year, energy and minerals overall budget increased to $1.048 billion for 24-25. This will be used to help advance the initiatives that I just spoke about. Funding will also support the creation of a new energy transition division, carbon capture utilization and storage initiatives, royalty operations, and grants under the Alberta Petrochemicals Incentive Program that is so popular. The department has also been tasked with taking on more of an ownership thinking direction that is consistent with my mandate letter to uphold our energy interest with all Albertans. I really like this approach. I view it as a return to the Lougheed approach to energy. This means ensuring we are assessing our policies and programs to ensure that Albertans are getting the fair owner share of the value of our resources. I've encouraged the department to look for added opportunities that support our government broadly and our role as owners of our resources. The ministry's expenditures also cover funding for the Department of Energy and Minerals, including staffing as well as the expenses for the cost of selling oil and for its entities. The ever-popular the Canadian Energy Centre and the Alberta Energy Regulator, which is world-class. As many of you know, the Alberta Energy Regulator regulates energy and mineral development in the province and is responsible for regulating the life cycle of oil, oil sands, natural gas, coal, geothermal, and brine-hosted mineral projects in Alberta. This year's budget allocates $246 million to the AER compared to $231 million last year. This funding increase ensures the AER can continue to fulfill their duties on behalf of Albertans. This includes ensuring companies develop our energy and mineral resources responsibly, public safety, and protecting our environment. I would like to note that funding for the AER actually comes from industry levies and fees, which are collected as revenue. Taxpayers do not directly fund the ongoing operations of the AER. While the AER regulates industry, we recognize that past governments allowed industry to abandon infrastructure despite requirements to reclaim industrial sites when projects ended their life cycle. Now, Budget 2024-25 includes funding for the Orphan Well Association to continue addressing this problem. We are looking for solutions. The good news is we've made some great progress. Over the past few years, the Orphan Well Association has decommissioned more wells and completed more reclamation projects than any other period in its history. Funds collected from industry under the Orphan Fund Levy, which funds the association, have an allocation of $135.5 million in this year's budget. Like funding for the AER's operating expenses, this work is also funded by industry. Reclamation work is helping improve the reputation of the oil and gas industry, especially here in Alberta. But we need to do a better job of telling Alberta's responsible energy development story. In addition to supporting regulation, the ministry will allocate $27 million for industry advocacy in 24-25. We must be able to help Alberta effectively respond to misinformation about our energy industry to sustain its vitality, and highlight sector innovations that are reducing emissions but not cutting production. The livelihoods of the many Albertans who work in this sector, particularly in my region of this province, really depend on us sharing the good things happening in their industry so we can generate new investment and new students to take the new jobs. Alberta's story is about building and diversifying the province's energy resource sectors. Budget 2024 will allow us to add more good news to our story by capitalizing on emerging opportunities such as liquefied natural gas, petrochemicals, manufacturing, hydrogen, geothermal, and critical minerals and carbon capture utilization and storage, which we have a very much a competitive advantage. We've had lots of good news to share recently when it comes to carbon capture and storage. Just prior to COP28 this past fall, I was pleased to join our Premier to launch the new Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program, or ACIP, similar to the successful Alberta Petroleum's Incentive Program. My ministry is currently working on program design with more details to be available later this spring. This will have a huge impact on energy resource production and achieve meaningful emissions reductions in many industries, including oil and gas, power generation, hydrogen, petrochemicals, and cement. We will be world leading. Through Budget 2024, we continue to support the development of carbon capture, utilization and storage, or CCUS technologies to help diversify our energy sector. In energy and minerals budget expenditures, we are investing a combined total of more than $58 million for Quest and Alberta Carbon Trunkline projects. Both projects have safely captured and stored a total of more than 11.5 million tons of carbon dioxide since starting operations, which is equivalent of emissions from 2.5 million cars per year off the road. I would like to mention that the work of my ministry often intersects with the works of environment and protected areas, whose budget includes a total of $226 million in existing funding through the Tier Fund for ACIP. A further $167 million from the Tier Fund over the next 3 fiscal years. This one government approach for carbon capture is essential in supporting Alberta industry by creating lower carbon products that will be more competitive in the global market as it emerges. Another win in our energy story is the success of APIP, the Alberta Petrochemicals Incentive Program. Our government will continue to honor commitments for our value-added natural gas strategy through this very important program. Budget 2024-25 allocates approximately $154 million for APIP, an increase of $7 million from last year. This includes funding for Rocky Mountain Clean Fuels Inc., Carseland gas to liquid plant that will convert natural gas into fuels, and multi-year projects from previous budgets for the Interpipeline Heartland Petrochemical Complex and the Dow Expansion Project, which we're so excited about. These projects represent billions of dollars worth of investment and reflect the continued growth opportunity in our natural gas system. APIP will help the province become a global leader in petrochemical production by enabling us to aggressively compete with jurisdictions right around the world and bring long-term investments and tens of thousands of jobs to our province. The Ministry of Energy and Minerals is also responsible for expenses related to the cost of selling oil. The Alberta Petrochemical Marketing Commission, or APMC, continues working to support the Government of Alberta, with its primary responsibility being marketing oil that the government receives as in-kind royalties. The APMC bears all costs related to marketing and selling Alberta's in-kind royalties on behalf of the government. This year, the cost of selling crude oil is budgeted to be $357 million, compared to $316 million last year.
Thank you, Minister. That's the end of your time. We will now begin the question and answer portion of the meeting. For the first 60 minutes, members of the official opposition and a minister may speak. Honorable members, you will be able to see the timer for the speaking block, both in the committee room and on Microsoft Teams. Question to the member that's going to be speaking first. Would you like to share time or block time?
Yeah, I'd love to share the time if possible.
Minister, are you share or block?
As much as everybody around me wants shared time, I prefer the block, so I'm going to go with the block. Thank you.
So, okay, the block of shared time is 20 minutes. So during which time you may go back and forth. No, I'm sorry. I made a mistake there. Remember, you have up to 10 minutes to ask your questions and make comments to the minister. Once you have done so, the minister will have 10 minutes to respond, and then we'd start the next 20 minutes. So go ahead and ask your first set of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd like to start by thanking the public service who have worked hard to produce this budget and to provide advice to the minister. So thank you for all the hard work. My first line of questioning here is around liabilities management in Alberta. In your ministry's business plan, on page 46, objective 2.2, it notes that collaborate with other ministries within the integrated resource management system to maintain and strengthen a balanced, responsible approach to managing the impacts of resource development activities and continue to implement the liability management framework. So let's go through recent history first, as recent as a few months ago. The government imposed a moratorium on renewable energy development in Alberta in the name of liability management and renewable energy development. And for the record, I disagree with shutting down our province for business in order to improve regulations. I think you can address liabilities and improve regulations while staying open for business. So for starters, now that the government has supposedly addressed liabilities in renewables, will the government now turn its attention to liabilities in oil and gas? And will the government address liabilities in the oil and gas sector without pausing operations in the sector? Looking at budget 2024, I'm not convinced that there are real investments to manage liabilities. The orphan well levy appears to be the same as last year. The industry levy for the AER increases slightly to almost 7 million or 3.2%. There is not much else in the budget that would increase confidence in the energy regulator. Mr. Chair, the Alberta Energy Regulator has lost the confidence of Albertans because the government has failed to clearly mandate this energy regulator to address liabilities. It has failed to address environmental crises like leaks in the tailings ponds and even properly notify Indigenous communities impacted. A First Nation in Northern Alberta has filed a lawsuit against the Alberta Energy Regulator, alleging negligence and a failure to live up to treaty obligations due to multiple tailings leaks at Imperial Oil Kearl facility. We saw the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation claims the regulator failed to inform the First Nation about the leaks. And the lawsuit alleges, and I quote here, negligence, nuisance, breach of the duty to consult, breach of the honor of the Crown, breach of fiduciary duty, and unjustified treaty infringement, end quote. Minister, and through you, Mr. Chair, has your ministry looked into this? Have you investigated these allegations? These are very serious allegations. And what steps are you actually taking to repair the relationship with this Indigenous community and to reform the energy regulator? The regulator, because the government has failed to mandate it, has allowed liabilities to grow dramatically and not hold companies accountable to clean up sites. In addition to all this, there are no consequences for companies who do not pay fees to landowners or taxes to municipalities. A recent paper published by the School of Public Policy at the U of C on unfunded oil and gas closure liability shows that Alberta is facing an environmental and financial crisis. The paper notes that there are roughly 237,000 drilled wells in Alberta's conventional operations. Oil and gas liabilities are estimated between $66 to $88 billion. It is unconscionable that the government cannot provide an appropriate estimate to liabilities. So do you plan to provide an actual real estimate? And how do you plan to report on the actual number of liabilities? And by the way, it was good to see the government including the Auditor General AR report in the fiscal plan. The Auditor General report between 2018 and 2022 has sounded the alarm on liabilities a few times. And it notes here, while the AER receives an annual report and 3-year budgets from the Orphan Well Association, the Auditor General, quote, did not see evidence that the AER uses the Orphan Well Association information to inform AER whether the Orphan Well Association is achieving its goals and objectives or estimating industry's orphans liability. These are quotes from the report. And then in the government's fiscal plan, pages 176 to 179, I see references to the Auditor General's recommendations, and there are generic responses like putting additional resources, but no specifics, and it's not even in the budget. So what's your actual plan to address the Auditor General's concerns? Specifically on page 178 of your fiscal plan, and I quote here, it says the AER will assess potential targets and thresholds by evaluating compliance assurance programs to validate if they're working as intended, end quote. What does that mean? Of course it's not working as intended. So I'd like to understand how exactly will the government address this crisis. It is a looming crisis, Minister, and if we don't have a clear action plan, it will fall on taxpayer money. And the government owes the public the actual numbers and actual plan to solve this crisis. And while we're discussing all this specifically on wells, I'd like to understand, are there any changes to the mandatory closure spending target for 2024, as well as from 2025 and 2027? And to begin, can you please tell us if the 2023 target was met? I would love that information. The challenge, as you can see, is that the polluter pays principle has been obstructed by poor policy and, even worse, implementation by the AR. This is why the government needs to budget and put resources in place and to implement programs to achieve the government objective, actually, 2.2 on page 44 of the Energy Ministry's business plan. And I believe, Minister, the government owes the public the actual number and the actual plan for this. I want to also go back to the Auditor General report where it specifically says, prior to 2022, it notes that, quote here, no example of the Alberta Energy Regulator suggesting modifications to the amount or evidence of AER doing an analysis of the proposed levy from the industry's levy. And that's the quote from the AER, from the report, sorry, the AG's report. Yeah, I would love your comments on this one. And if you can maybe start with telling us if the 2023 target for the mandatory closure spending, was it met in 2023 or not? Thank you.
Would I just carry? Yep. Okay, Minister, go ahead. You have 10 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, and I took as detailed notes as I could for the first half, and hopefully I'll get the general theme of your questions. And if I don't answer all of your questions, I certainly invite you to ask me in the House or anywhere else that is necessary by letter or whatever. But I'd be happy to just talk about, first of all, what you said at the start, which was collaborate. And I really like that. I think that's the approach by this government. We're doing that with industry, with First Nations, and with groups across the province, because we think that sitting down at the table and collaborating will get us better results. And, you know, I'm not going to take shots, even though I was here when the NDP was in government. I was just kind of surprised, to be honest, that, you know, the first thing the NDP did pretty much was ask billionaires that own coal mines across the world to come and invest in Schedule II lands in Alberta. I was kind of surprised at that because, of course, that would bother me as an environmentalist, and I think that was the wrong approach. And I expected more from the NDP government of the day as far as environmental performance, and I didn't see that. But I do believe that you hit the mark, and I'm glad to see where you're going on the polluter pays principle, because that's what our government believes in, and that's what we're heading towards on all of our files. And I would suggest that that's the best way to have accountability going forward, and we'll get best results for Albertans, because there's nothing more important than the water and the air that we breathe and the soil that we live on. And, you know, in fact, this morning, going to another part of your question, I was with some First Nations chiefs here in Edmonton, and we were talking about getting the federal government to come to the table with $135 million that they've allocated for cleanup on oil and gas reserves, or on First Nations reserves to clean up oil and gas assets that the federal government left there. And, you know, I think that's a good way to collaborate. And sitting down with those First Nations or other First Nations like Mackay, where I was last week, announcing a mine project, which we haven't seen in quite a while. And, you know, the government talking about so many different files with so many First Nations. And the word they used today and last week was the word trust. Trust for this government. And I think the truth of it is that the very fact that this litigation is happening in northern Alberta, in my own home, which I went and visited the site, means that our system is working. And that's what I'm really glad of. I'm glad that people have their opportunity to have a day in court or a day before the AER and have an independent third party actually doing proper adjudication. Now, I know that my friends might laugh at it because it wasn't independent during the days the NDP were in government. It was a mess, a schmozzle, and other things that I don't want to say about the AER, because I think right now it is one of the best, if not the best, regulator in the world, because it's independent. It's arm's length from this government, and it's making decisions in the best interests of Albertans and the longevity of our water, air, and earth. And I know you, all three, the NDP members and all of the government, agree with me in relation to that. But that's the kind of collaboration I like. And, you know, we're seeing a number of initiatives with First Nations in this government because they trust this government and they trust us to have their back, and we will have their back just like we have Albertans' back. I know I have some other things that I wanted to talk about in relation to the AER. Especially, I'd like to just say that, you know, as I've gone to different conferences around Canada and talked to people from all over the world, I've learned one thing about the AER. And that is that it is probably the best regulator in the world, because everybody comes here and asks how we do things. And I had at least 3 people in the last 3 months ask me at different conferences if the AER would help them and their country set up a proper regulatory system. That's the kind of reputation I like, especially when you're talking about some of the countries in Africa and elsewhere around the world. That's a regulator to be proud of. And we have to get it back to the point where every single Albertan trusts that regulator. But I do, because, you know, I see some of the things that have happened. Alberta's actually decreased the number of inactive wells from 91,000 to 83,000, a 9% reduction. Companies spent over $696 million to clean up liabilities last year. That exceeded the closure spending requirement of the AER by 65%. So the Alberta companies, those corporations, they are actually doing the work because our program incents them to do the work. Now, the file is complex, there's no question of it, but having industry setting aside money for innovative solutions to climate change, as well as opportunities to make sure that they are responsible for cleaning up their sites, is absolutely essential. And today we talked about that with those First Nations chiefs from all over Alberta, about how we make sure we protect the water, the land, and the air. And they've committed to me to help us with that mandate. Now, I just have so many things to say here. You know, I think I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about what's going on. The first thing is that we did so well with our target last year that we've now kept that target at 700 million for 2024, and we think industry can hit that. The AER has taken a more holistic approach to the cleanup, and we actually working on some innovative projects to accelerate that cleanup and make it advantageous for companies to work in one particular area or have other innovative solutions to have them do more cleanup more quickly. Now, we've had some interesting files of late in relation to coal, and I know that you folks wanted to know some information about coal generally and what's going on there. And I will tell you, first of all, that we do have litigation, unfortunately, in the situation in Curl. So I can't go into that in particular, and I can't go into Grassy Mountain in particular and the other coal issues. But I can tell you this about the Curl project, and I wanted to bring this forward, that I actually went to the site because I was concerned about the environment. And I saw the amount and number and types of safeguards they had around these tailings ponds. And they gave me a lot of comfort at the time, and I mentioned that on Twitter, actually. And although no system is perfect, I believe that the systems I saw and the understanding I have of Curl was superior to anything that I would have come up with as a non-engineer. But fortunately, I rely on other people for great ideas. And I will tell you that I think that our industry is doing a great job, and I think that our regulator is doing a great job, although it could be better, and they are, I think, improving. And this review that we've got right now that's coming forward, I think will be a review that will move our regulator into a class all to its own, and make sure that it is and continues to be responsible to the people of Alberta. You know, and that's why we want to make sure that it's an independent arm's length regulator, because that's how we ensure that energy development is safe and reliable and environmentally responsible. And just so you know, the AER conducts regular audits and inspections, and they conducted last year, for instance, 8,128 inspections with a compliance rate of 73%. Now, what does that mean? It means that they go around the province and they do a lot of inspections, and they do that so they make things better. And I think that these are important tools, those inspections and those officers are important tools to support. And being that the industry supports it themselves and we have a high compliance with the industry, we are doing, I think, a very good job, and things are only looking better. Now, I had a couple other questions there. I know I did. Oh, unpaid taxes. Now, I guess on that, I can tell you that we understand the file, and although most corporations are diligent to pay their taxes when and due, not every corporation does pay their bills when due, and we do have that issue, and we're trying to tighten that belt up a little bit so we get more compliance. But the overwhelming majority of these companies have been paying their taxes, and so right now we've put some safeguards in place. If there is unpaid taxes, I think $20,000 is the amount. If there's over $20,000 that is owing, the AER won't allow them to transfer their licenses without paying that. So there are some pretty good safeguards that weren't there, and we're looking at better opportunities there. Now, was there any other questions that I missed?
I think the orphan one, tab 19.
Thank you, Minister. And same speaker or different speaker this time? Different?
Same.
Same? Okay.
Same.
So, okay, we'll go for the next 10-minute block. Go ahead.
So, Minister, I didn't get answers to my questions. I think we agree we have good regulations, but our regulations are not enforced at the moment. I hope you understand that the government needs to mandate the AER to address liabilities. Your government needs to mandate the AER to enforce regulations. We do have great regulations. They're not being enforced right now. And my real question here, do you plan to provide an actual estimate to the liabilities? What is going on with liabilities? We have estimates up to $88 billion. We do not have actuals. So it is just unconscionable that the government cannot provide the public a real, actual number on liabilities in Alberta. So what is your plan to reform the energy regulator. I want to continue with the theme of liabilities here, Mr. Chair. And on budget estimates, page 77, line item 4.1, I'd like some updates on the site rehabilitation program now that this program is completed. Just a reminder, Mr. Chair, that the site rehabilitation program was a $1 billion economic infusion that the federal government gave Alberta as part of its national economic response to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. The program was criticized by the Auditor General because of the provincial government's delays in actioning this money. This morning, it was announced that $135 million are still outstanding and are waiting for the federal government. In the estimates document, there is no money budgeted for this program this year and only $605,000 last year. Does this mean that the province is not expecting this money to be spent this year? That's my question. In the press conference today as well, it was also highlighted that the province is waiting for the federal government to make sure this can be spent. However, the program was flagged by the Auditor General for its inefficiencies. As you know, Alberta took much longer to spend the federal money, much longer than BC and Saskatchewan. And as you know, the province had to award all grants for site cleanup by March 31st, 2022. And the money was supposed to be spent by the end of 2022. It wasn't. So the Auditor General highlighted the risk that money might be returned to the federal government. Can you explain to us when the $137 million in question was allocated, and did that meet the federal deadline? Because according to the government, the full $1 billion here has at least been allocated. So can you confirm whether the province was able to spend the $137 million, or did the province spend the full $1 billion? What's happening with that program? And based on that, can you break it down for us? How many wells are expected to be reclaimed and how many are remediated under the program? I'd love these details. And I'm also curious if your department has done any analysis, had the government spent that money when they were supposed to. You see, during COVID, the industry was seeing very little activity. Everything was cheaper because oil service companies did not have much work and inflation wasn't rampant yet. So the money would have gone further. So in other words here, more wells would have been cleaned up for the same amount of money. So I'd like to understand if your ministry did a comparison analysis. Can you please share with us any of these details? And with the funds from the program being depleted, how will the total spending, if we combine the public funds and the industry funds on well reclamation and remediation, differ here? Can you give us a total for the years between 2021 and 2022, and what do you expect in 2024 in terms of the number of wells and total dollars being spent here? And again, I'd like to remind you of the December 2023 report. The Auditor General frames the consequences of not taking action on this finding as follows. Quote, if weaknesses in regulatory compliance activities are not resolved, there is an increased likelihood that inactive oil and gas infrastructure is not properly closed within a reasonable amount of time, which potentially increases the risk to the environment or to public health and safety. End quote. I have a few questions here on the Mine Financial Security Program as well. Again, I want to go to your ministry's business plan on page 46, objective 2.2, that notes to collaborate with other ministries within the integrated resource management system to maintain and strengthen a balanced, responsible approach to managing the impacts of resource development activities and continue to implement the liability management framework. You mentioned you like collaboration. I'm assuming you're collaborating closely with the Ministry of Environment on this file. So I'd like to understand your collaboration on the Mine Financial Security Program, or the MFSP here. So the collaboration here is on the liability piece for mining. And just a friendly reminder that the Alberta Energy Regulator for the Ministry of Energy, as well as Environment here, started a review of the Mine Financial Security Program for oil sands back in 2022, largely structured around finally responding to concerns raised by the Auditor General twice, most recently in 2021. It has been more than 18 months since your government reviewed these recommendations from the Auditor General, and with no actions on the recommendations. The Mine Financial Security Program shows that liabilities increased from $34 billion to $48 billion. That is a 40% increase. Can you explain how your budget plans to address liabilities in mining? What is the amount of security you intend to collect this year? We saw the annual MFSP submissions tell us that from September 2022 to 2023, that the MFSP once again collected $0 in security from oil sands operators. So what will the percentage of securities be compared to liabilities? How much will be in surety bonds? How much in other securities? Finally, while I have you here, also a friendly reminder, when is your government going to turn attention to the liabilities in pipelines? The 2022 Auditor General report asked the government to start addressing liabilities in pipelines. It is around $30 billion. The government used to have an industry closure schedule. The industry-wide closure spending requirements were set at $700 million for 2023, and then forecasted to increase to $764 million in 2024, and then forecasted to increase to $833 million in 2025, and then forecasted to increase to $909 million in 2026, and then $992 million in 2027. Why did your government and ministry erase the schedule? Why is it annual as opposed to a 3-4 year schedule? Addressing liabilities cannot be a discretionary exercise. This should be a real implementation program. It should have a schedule. It should be planned in your programming. And I would love to understand why the schedule was erased, especially that we haven't seen any action on liabilities. And I'd really love some estimates and a real plan to understand how will your government address the liabilities crisis in pipelines, in wells, and in mining. And I look forward to hearing your response.
Thank you, Member. Minister, you have 10 minutes to respond.
So many places to go. First of all, truly appreciate the opportunity to be here. I just would say in relation to one of your first comments regarding enforcement and that the AER wasn't doing enforcement, I don't agree. I don't think that's the case at all. I think they do good enforcement, and the industry tells me so. So they, the very fact that industry had better performance on some of the cleanups that they've done than was expected them from AER, I think clearly says that what we're doing is working. And regarding the review of the AER and specifically what's going to come out of that, because you're asking a lot of questions that are presupposing, what we're doing with that review. But I do want you to know that we do have, some excellent advice on that. Dave Yeager, who wrote Miracle to Menace, which is a great book. You should pick it up if you haven't read it yet. It'll explain a lot of Alberta's history on what is nothing short of a miracle, natural gas and oil, and having it here. But I do think, from memory, and if I'm wrong on this, I know my officials can help me. I think the total amount was somewhere around $137 million that's left in this fund. They expect about 2,000 wells to be cleaned up if they were able to allocate that money here to Alberta's First Nations, because it's just for wells on reserves. That is obviously the ultimate responsibility of the federal government. We're simply there as a friend, as a people that a government that is greatly concerned about some of these leftover assets, and as you said, the liability from some of them. So that's why we were there, and we just managed that fund for the province. And the reality of that is that we did, as a province, we actually allocated 100% of the fund. Industry, unfortunately, because of a variety of factors, I think there's a 2-year limitation time frame in which they needed to spend money as well. It was a very cold winter, I think. One of the notes I read indicated that. And as a result of that, industry just didn't spend the last $137 million. And, if we could have had a little extension from the federal government, we believe it could be finished and it could be done well. And I don't know where you got that information on the Auditor General, but I thought the Auditor General gave a pretty good, a clean bill of health to the SRP and actually said good job with good matrices. But maybe we can agree to disagree on that, and I'll do a little bit more homework to make sure I've got that correct. But I thought we got pretty good reviews on that. I do know that the chiefs sure feel strongly about it. They've talked to me about it for 4 or 5 months. If not longer, and they're concerned. They have folks that are ready, willing, and able to do the jobs and clean up federal obligation on First Nation sites, and we're just there to help them and be their partners. Speaking of collaboration, and as far as the piece of legislation that is environment, and you'd have to ask my colleague, the Minister of Environment, relating to mine security, but I can help you with a little bit more information in relation to the integrated resource management system, because we do, as the Alberta government, approach the management of our natural resources in an integrated approach to understand the interests of Albertans in managing those Crown resources, because they belong to them. And we're trying to take an ownership role on those resources, as we should, because they are our resources, and industry is on there at the pleasure of the Crown. The department's effort to inform the government of Alberta's activities in these areas are undertaken through the integrated resource management system, and that's made up of a network of key organizations, including energy and minerals, environment and protected areas, forestry and parks, indigenous relations, agriculture and irrigation, and affordability and utilities, as well as the Alberta Energy Regulator. Let's see, where else should we go, sir?
I guess I would just, I'd like to go back, I guess, really to the Orphan Well program relative to some of the comments that you made. We do actually have specific figures for the Orphan Well program that are very clear. Over the last 4 years, the OWA has decommissioned more wells than they've received, as the minister stated. The actual figures on those, in 2022-23, the OWA decommissioned 781 wells, a decrease of 34% from the previous year, as the OWA returned to a more regular pace of work following the provincial and federal loan programs. So this last year, we did in fact come off in the number because of the $1 billion that was provided by the federal government. Reclaimed 431 sites, an increase of 57% from the previous year, and completed over 2,000 inspections, as I think the minister stated. The number of orphan wells in the OWA program and inventory to be decommissioned increased by 33% to 2,253 at the end of 2022-23 from 1,700 the year before. The number of orphan well sites in the reclamation inventory increased to 21% to 7,117. At the end of 2022-23 from 5,887 at the end of 2021-22. The reclamation inventory increased from the OWA received new sites, or when the OWA has finished decommissioning wells and has transferred the sites into the reclamation inventory. The OWA inventory from the OWA 2022-2023 annual report consists of orphan wells requiring abandonment, pipelines requiring abandonment, orphan sites, reclamation required reclamation, as well as a number of pipeline segments for abandoned and additional sites for decommissioning and suspension. The OWA's mandate is to manage the abandonment and closure of orphan sites that do not have a solvent or responsible owner, as you know, to protect the people and the environment and remove the potential risk of unfunded liability. So I wanted to address that with the actual facts. I would like to also just go back to the actual loan status. I think you're aware of the fact that the government has actually loaned the OWA a substantial amount of money, which is in repayment. That loan was $335 million, I should say, available through that was available through the Orphan Well program. Wouldn't it be nice? The loan will be repaid by industry, and I think it's an extremely important part of this that the government has stepped up to loan the OWA the money. That OWA loan will be repaid to about $121.8 million to the government of Alberta. Under the Orphan Well program, the OWA has completed 3,512 abandonments. 4,282 pipelines have been decommissioned. And so your comment in regards to pipelines probably needs to be reflected relative to it, including pipelines. 2,303 sites reclaimed, 6,483 Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental risks completed. 12,487 inspections completed. 4,665 pipeline abandonment operations are underway. This work has generated 2,170,293 hours of work, an average of 271 full-time direct jobs. And the OWA has contracted approximately 1,150 different companies to perform this work. The Orphan Well Association also received a federal loan of $200 million under Canada's COVID response, and that contributed to those numbers. So I think in regards to the OWA, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of those facts, and happy to turn that back in regards to any other questions.
And Larry, you missed one of the important agreements of Orphan Wells. It takes time to actually have plants grow and for them to reclaim and get to that point. So what we will probably see in the very near future is a whole bunch of wells, a whole bunch of cleanups happening because of that, the nature of the growth period. So.
Is that it? Okay. Same questioner? Different questioner? Okay, I'm required to ask if you'd like to share or block time whenever we change the speaker. Would you rather share?
Share.
Share, Minister, would you share or block?
I'm a block guy.
Okay, we're going to go block. So you have 10 minutes to ask your
Chair, I
question.
thought that had been resolved. I didn't know we got to.
Time we change
I got it
speakers.
now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Minister, so much praise for the Alberta Energy Regulator, and you increased their budget by $15 million this year over last. I've heard of regulation capture, but Minister, it seems like this time we have regulator has captured your heart. I think that's what we're seeing here. With a lot of love for this regulator. On the fiscal plan on page 62, non-renewable resource revenue, as you mentioned, Minister, you are responsible for an enormous amount of government revenue. It is an incredible responsibility. The estimates for non-renewable resource revenue for the province is $17 billion. Now, royalties from coal, I don't think they even make up 0.1% of our non-renewable resource revenue. In fact, I noticed that royalties from coal are so small that in this budget you combined it with in a line item with rentals and fees. So total rentals and fees for coal royalty is budgeted to be about $209 million. Now I recall at the peak of coal power in this province that royalties from coal were always small, approximately $14 to $26 million a year. And so it would be really helpful if you want to break out the split between royalty from coal and rentals and fees, and then if you could just even give some color about what rentals and fees are. And if you can define that for me, that'd be great. Now, when I learned how little royalty revenue Alberta earned from coal in the past, when the majority of our power was generated by burning coal, it baffled me, to be honest. And someone offered the explanation that electricity was a common good used by Albertans, so it did not make sense to earn meaningful royalties from coal used within our province to generate electricity. However, I recall a report from 2013 that outlined the burden on our healthcare system from asthma, heart disease, and premature deaths created by burning coal, and that was about $300 million a year for the economy. So then I wondered if there was an argument for raising royalties on coal, given the cost of using it that was borne on Albertans and on our health. And so I understand an argument for local jobs that a mine could create, but I'm wondering if you can tell me the total estimate for royalties that you come up with for the proposed mine in the Grassy Mountain mine for Northback. So once that comes through, if you had an estimate on what those royalties would be for the province, and are you considering raising our royalty rate for that mine? And it would be helpful to have it on an annual basis, and then maybe even estimate over the life of the mine. And then I'm wondering if you, in that same equation, can let me know what the government's estimate will be for the burden Albertans will bear for the mine in terms of water contamination or water shortages, and the overall economy burden that Albertans will have to experience, just so we have that kind of square of that kind of the scenario I had with coal that was used for power. And I just want to understand the costs and benefits of the Northback Holdings new mine that you're helping to develop in Alberta. Now, the proposed Grassy Mountain coal mine that Northback Holdings wants to develop on the eastern slopes of the Rockies is going to get a new hearing from the Alberta Energy Regulator because of a letter that you wrote. And according to that letter that was released, I guess on Facebook by the AER, they made the determination after it got the letter from you in the fall to proceed with a new hearing. And so I can just read that letter. I think I have time. The AER received clarification on a ministerial order and the definition of the advanced coal project in a letter from the Minister of Energy on November 16th, 2023. And so the minister's letter provides that once a project summary has been submitted and a project is considered an advanced coal project, it remains as such regardless of previous application outcomes. The Alberta Energy Regulator is vested with authority to decide whether the application lands are subject to an advanced coal project and whether to accept Northback applications for this mine. So, just moving forward, bearing this in mind, the letter from the Minister of Energy clarifying that the application for the ministerial order, a binding direction to the AER from the same minister, carries significant weight. So as contemplated in the ministerial order and the minister's letter, a project summary was previously submitted to the AER for purposes of determining whether an environmental impact assessment was required. Accordingly, the AER has determined that the Category 4 lands upon which application activities have been proposed are subject to an advanced coal project. It has therefore accepted the application. They've therefore accepted the application filed by Northback. The AER has also determined, pursuant to Section 33(1) of the Responsible Energy Development Act, that the application should be set down for a new hearing. So exploration project proposals cost a lot of money, and exploration costs accompany a lot of money. On March 31st, Northback is sponsoring the Crow's Nest Pass, the largest Easter egg hunt ever. And on February 28th, Northback celebrated Australia Day in the Crow's Nest Pass and presented a giant check for $39,404 to build a Crow's Nest Pass outdoor skate park. On February 5th, Northback Holdings committed $75,000 per year over the next several years to expand the Livingston Range School Division's nutrition program. Currently, that program serves 1,000 students. They will be able to serve an additional 1,000 students thanks to the money from Northback Holdings. Of all these gifts from Northback Holdings are amazing. Skate parks, giant Easter egg hunts, and especially a commitment of $75,000 per year for several years to a school division's nutrition program. I understand Northback presented another giant check for $600,000 for that announcement. The company must have reasons to believe they have a high probability of getting through a new AER hearing. The mine already went through the federal and provincial review processes and were denied the license for the Grassy Mountain site that is part of and included in the new project proposal. Northback would not be putting forward a project application for exploration approval on a project site that it is expanded upon from the last project site that was already denied by a joint federal provincial hearing unless they had some confidence that they would be getting through this proposal. Most Albertans thought that the exploration and development of a new coal mine in our Rocky Mountains was put to rest. You are supporting the development of Northback Holdings' proposed Grassy Mountain mine in the Rocky Mountains. How much will the AER review cost for this mining project exploration license that is just an expansion of a mining site that has already been denied? How much will that cost the province? Staying with coal, I noticed that in the workforce transition on page 92 of Alberta's fiscal plan, it provides financial support for employees affected by the phase-out of coal-fired electricity generation. In the fiscal report, it forecasted we spent about $2 million last fiscal year. In the estimates, it actually has on page 141 that we spent $5.4 million. So I'm just wondering if you can clarify that difference. The government has budgeted $9 million for this year for the coal workforce transition program. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of what that big bump is, because that seems to be about 4 times spend than we typically have had for the workforce transition for coal mine. You know, I just want to bring up another one with regards to Grand Cache. So in 2015, the coal mine put the last of its 650 miners out of work, and that really cast a pall on that town. It once had a population of 5,000, and the exodus of families has continued unabated ever since. Crow's Nest Pass is a tourism zone. Can you provide some insight into the discussion and approaches between tourism and mining? These seem to be at odds. So how does it work when you're looking at tourism versus mining for something like Grassy Mountain? Do you get to go bike riding in the open pit on your mountain bike? Just looking for some vision for that.
Thank you. Minister, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. It's funny you mentioned that mountain biking in an old tailings pond, because there's a community just west of Edmonton that's asked for something similar to that, working with industry. So it's kind of interesting you mentioned that, because they're trying to take one of their industries, which was coal, and to recycle that with some of the infrastructure that's still there into something that's beneficial to wildlife and to the community itself. So congratulations on your thinking. And I'm just wondering, was that a Northback coal mine advertisement that you just gave with the Easter egg hunt and stuff? Because I was thinking, wow, that's a company that I'm proud of. If they're coming into a community and they're actually spreading the wealth around that community and making sure that they do everything right by applying for an application and going through the processes and obeying the rule of law. I like companies like that. I like companies that are, come before the AER and make an application, and they get to have their day to decide, just like Albertans get to have their day as well. And I think it's important to have an open, transparent, rigorous process by which Albertans can be dependable on. You're right. I came to this ministry not expecting to like the AER so much, but when I get closer to it, I recognize how important of a function it has in our industry, how important it is, as you mentioned. I mean, I think we $18 billion in royalties last year in the oil sands, another $3 billion in corporate taxes just by oil sands companies. Some serious money that builds great schools, hospitals, roads, all those things that Albertans really depend on, and frankly, I think those things that we expect. So, and the other place I pick up my information, as I mentioned before, is from people that I talk to in the industry that I meet at all these conferences and come to my office, and they talk about the AER in reverence. And so when people from around the world do that and say, I wish I was more like you, or I wish we could be more like you, I take notice of that. So that's where my praise comes from, and I think more Albertans should be proud of some of the industries and regulators that we have here because they do perform amazing functions. Can they get better? Absolutely. We all can. But are they doing a great job right now? Yes, they are. So, and you know, you mentioned you had some questions about rentals, and I will tell you I've had some complaints from people that are paying fees for leases on coal leases, which just gives them the right to make an application. It doesn't give them any right on coal, but they're paying rents on those lands, and I know that they don't like paying the rent on those lands, but you know, that's our expectation. That's the agreement we entered into with them, and we expect them to pay it, which they are. So I just want to let you know that's many of the cases. It sounds like you folks, if you ever get back into government, which, you know, you won't open up Category 2 lands again for coal mining. It sort of sounds like that from your questions, and I hope you don't, because I think that's a big mistake. To open up a greenfield mining, and send out letters all across the world to have people come and invest there is just not, I think, a good signal to Albertans. We need to make sure that we have a world-class regulator that ascertains all the environmental benefits and the long-term benefits to the people of Alberta and makes a decision based on that, and only that. And you mentioned raising royalties on coal. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about coal because it's a little bit, I've asked for a few briefs on this because I was very interested in it. You know, they increased a lot from 2022-23 compared to 21-22. Now, first of all, two royalty regimes are in effect based on the nature of the coal reserve. Crown-owned sub-bituminous plains coal, which is 55 cents a ton, and Crown-owned bituminous mountain foothills coal, which is 1% of mine mouth revenue before mine payout and 1% of mine mouth revenue plus 13% of net revenue after mine payout. Provincial coal revenues in 22-23 were $145.6 million. This was a significant increase compared to $10.4 million collected in 21-22 and was due to two factors: high coal prices and the Vista mine entering the post-payout royalty tier, much like oil sands revenues has now hit that. And the details in particular of coal royalties go back to 2019-20, which was 12.8, 2021, which was 12, and as I mentioned, 21-22 was 10.4, and then 22-23 was 145.6. And you've asked, you know, for some forecasting and expectations of forecasts. I don't deal with hypotheticals in relation to Grassy Mountain, and you know, we'll leave that to the AER to go through all those numbers and to see whether it's worth it to the people of Alberta. But I will tell you that one thing that we're doing with this government is keeping strong restrictions in place on coal mining in the foothills. And the ministerial order just reinstated the 1976 coal policy, which was protecting the eastern slopes, and it will continue to do so. Coal exploration and development activities remain restricted on the eastern slopes on all Category 2, 3, and 4 lands. They've always been banned in Category 1. Alberta's rigorous regulatory system remains in place, and especially relating to the water and the air. If we have the best air monitoring, best water monitoring in the world in the oil sands, if it's good enough for the oil sands, there's nothing wrong with it to be applicable to coal and other industries in Alberta. The government of Alberta will not interfere with operating mines that are safely underway or put those hardworking Albertans and those communities who operate those sites out of work. But under the ministerial order, activities already in progress for those mines, active mines and advanced coal projects can continue, as well as activities related to security or safety. The order allows abandonment and reclamation activities to continue as well. These restrictions will remain in effect until new or updated land use plans are completed by Minister Schultz, the Minister of Environment. This will include comprehensive consultations with Albertans, Indigenous community, and others. It's very clear that modernizing Alberta's management of coal resources is a very complex undertaking. People are very passionate about it, and we recognize the strong interest from communities and the strong interest in our future, because water is life. I commit to you that we will protect Alberta's water. We will insist on the highest standards for resource development, like we always do, and like we do right across the province. We will never allow what, frankly, the NDP allows in British Columbia. I don't know if you're aware of this, but North America's largest export terminal is Vancouver under the NDP. And frankly, some of the worst types of coal. So I would just suggest, some of your concerns, which are real concerns, you should address a letter to the leader of the NDP next door and get them to change it. Now, I've invited a few Albertans, including Corbelin, to come with me to Elk Valley to take a look at what's going on there, so we can make sure that we never have the same thing happen here in Alberta. But would you like to make a few comments on Grassy and Northback?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. Thank you. I guess I just wanted to reference you did actually ask at one point just in regards to the actual cost for rentals and fees. Rental and fee on our business plan is on page 48, $209 million. Lease rental and fees plus coal royalties of about $150 million. And as the minister stated, our coal royalties were up substantially last year to $145 million, as he said, based on both post payout as well as, quite frankly, I think energy security globally. I think we overall saw coal prices up globally as a result of what occurred in Europe the year before, and that spilled over into our royalty framework with higher prices overall, which did generate higher royalties overall. As you're probably all aware, we currently are in a situation where the Alberta government is currently facing 5 lawsuits pertaining to the coal exploration and development pause. As these matters are before the courts, we won't provide any substantial comment, but I will address some facts relative to what is in the public domain. On September the 6th, 2023, Northback applied to the AER for approval to conduct a coal exploration program and to acquire a deep drill permit. The AER holds the authority to determine advanced coal project status and whether they to accept that application. In a letter to the AER, the Minister of Energy and Minerals did provide his interpretation of appropriate application of the definition of an advanced coal project under Ministerial Order 002-2022. Under MO 002-2022, an advanced coal project is one that had submitted a project summary to the regulator for the purposes of determining whether an environmental impact assessment is required before the MO was signed. The definition of advanced coal project in the MO makes no references to the outcomes of applications.
Very much. You have 2 minutes and 26 seconds if you would like to ask some more questions,
Oh, sure.
if you want.
All right, it's okay. Thank you. So the Edmonton Hydrogen Hub is a good example of how Alberta can be a leader in developing low-carbon industries. And other communities such as Calgary are looking for similar hubs, and it really came from municipal leadership from about 5 municipalities. Is there any funding in the budget to support these initiatives for industrial collaboration, industrial zones? What has your engagement been on that? And can you explain to what extent you're supporting demand growth for clean hydrogen in Alberta? I noticed that one thing that stood out was that on fiscal plan page 117, the Clean Energy Hydrogen Center of Excellence is getting no funding for 24-25. So I didn't know if maybe their mandate was done. It seemed like in 2022, your government committed $50 million to the Clean Hydrogen Center of Excellence, and it seemed to be coming out in tranches of about 8 or 9 million. So I just wondered if we could look at that. Maybe I read it wrong, but I thought on page 117 they weren't getting any money in the budget. The economy, the hydrogen economy is expected to be, I think, be worth multi-trillions. I've seen 2.5 to 11 trillion by 2015, according to the Natural Gas Vision and Strategy document. And so I'm just wondering what has happened to that Clean Hydrogen Center of Excellence funding. How does no funding for the Clean Energy Hydrogen Center square with the hydrogen roadmap that the government has set out? And then I guess back to those lawsuits that were mentioned, what was the total bill that is facing with that? Is it $6 billion? And just with regards to a deep drill permit, just because I don't know what the minister called it, an unengineer, if you could explain what a deep drill permit is versus one that would go for coal mining. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just for future reference, anything that is before the courts, we should try to avoid talking about. It's 23G II. It's just we need to be careful not to bring stuff up that is before the courts. And I know the minister has answered questions and suggested that he can't because it's before the court. So if we can avoid those in the future, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you. Okay, that's it for that block. We will now go to the independent member for 20 minutes. So since you're a new one, would you like to share, or was block time good for you?
I would, what's he say it again, please?
You share back and forth.
Yes,
with
please.
Minister, would you rather go block time?
Well, I would much prefer block. I'm sorry, I just.
Fair enough, okay. So, all right, well, we'll go for blocks. So remember, you have 10 minutes to ask your questions, and the minister will answer for 10 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the minister. On page 47 of the Ministerial Business Plan, 2B, there is a performance indicator of the regulatory compliance from the Alberta Energy Regulator. Starting in 2019, it was at 78% for compliant inspections. It rose slightly to 79% in the following year, and then continued to decrease up until 22 and 23 to 73%. Can you give an explanation for what is the reason for this decrease in compliance, and what areas of non-compliance are responsible for this decrease? And then in both the budget and in the business plan, it talks about the energy ministry spending money on industry advocacy, which we heard reference to earlier. I want to ask about a related topic, and that is the push by left-wing groups to get people to stop investing in oil and gas. On December 20th, 2023, Dutch bank ING announced it would stop financing oil and gas exploration and production by 2040 and triple new lending to renewable energy over the next 2 years. While ING is a smaller player in the global oil and gas financing, its announcement can be seen as part of a trend over the last year by European banks. On December 14th, 2023, Crédit Agricole, France's second largest bank, announced it would no longer finance new fossil fuel extraction projects and would triple its annual financing of renewable and low carbon energy by $14.5 billion US by 2025. Then on February 15th, 2023, UK-based Barclays Bank announced it would stop financing oil sands exploration and production, as well as new oil sands pipelines. Barclays' decision marks a notable shift from a few years ago, when between 2016 and 2021, it provided $4.3 billion to oil sands investments. In December 2022, UK-based HSBC announced it would cease financing new oil and gas projects globally. HSBC has announced earlier in 2022 that it would be selling its Canadian subsidiary, HSBC Canada, which had approximately $3 billion US of financing in various oil sands projects, to RBC. To me, this is obviously a problem. Can the minister let us know what he is generally doing to fight the divestment from Alberta's energy sector? The estimates we saw were on section 2.3 on page 75. Following up on that, if we are always fighting to build pipelines, why did we have such a significant amount of pipeline abandonments, as mentioned earlier. To go on to orphan wells, which I think was very well discussed, and I had several comments about that too. Can you just explain how many are currently outstanding as orphan well abandonments, and any timeline that you can offer on that as to when those will be resolved? And then, does the Ministry of Energy and Minerals have any capital investment in the riding of Lacombe-Panoka? And if so, could you elaborate on that? I am familiar with one, and it is the carbon capture project near the town of Clive. It is rather substantial. Can you talk to that a little bit and how significant that project is for that area and for Alberta? And we did hear about the unpaid taxes for municipalities. It is an issue that I hear regularly, not just among our municipalities, but amongst the business section at large. With the decrease in municipal funding recently and inflation costs, municipalities are suffering. And I hear regularly that these unpaid taxes would certainly benefit them in a really hard line and at the end of their budget year. So can you respond, you I think said that it was about 20,000 for the safeguards? For outstanding unpaid taxes. How effective are these safeguards, and what is being done to ensure that our municipalities will get their unpaid taxes from oil wells? I think we'll have to leave that one. Yeah, and that's it. I'm letting you off easy.
Another 4 minutes.
You can take it if you want it.
First of all, I'll start with one of your last questions. I think number 4 or 5 was in relation to my department and whether or not we have any capital investments in your riding. Well, you mentioned one that we'd be heavily involved with, which of course is the CCUS opportunity in Clive, because it is one of the top sites and largest sites in the province for carbon injection underground, and we believe we have a serious competitive opportunity there with the rest of the world. I mean, the rest of the world right now, Korea and even Ontario, are talking about opportunities to transport their GHGs by boat and inject it into wells beneath bodies of water. And in Alberta, we just pretty much have to drill down and we can find a site for it, and we have expertise in that. So is there an opportunity in Lacombe-Panoka? Well, there's a great opportunity from industry, and we'd encourage industry to take CCUS very seriously, as the rest of the world is, and we have huge competitive advantages there. So will we see success as a result of that? I think that we have real opportunities as a result of CCUS and how competitive it is for us. Now, as far as the performance indicators you mentioned, first of all, as you know, the AER is committed to ensuring that energy development is safe and environmentally responsible and in the best interest of Albertans. And we know, as a result of a previous answer to our friends across the way, that the AER regularly inspects, audits, and monitors energy sites, pipelines, and mines to ensure compliance with our requirements. And we look for best practices on how to improve that as we go forward. And companies are encouraged to proactively identify, report, and correct their actions. The AER keeps a watchful eye to ensure compliance, but they're encouraged to do so, and it's a safety management system that works well for the airlines industry and other industries, and it's working well here in Alberta. It means that we get better as time goes, and that's what it's all about in relation to something like this. In 22-23, the AER conducted 8,128 inspections with a satisfactory compliance rate of 73%. Oh, I wish I would have done so well in high school. I think the change from year to year, from 73 to 75 to 78, is fairly normal variation because it seems to center around 75%. And if the AER finds a company that is not following the requirements, they will apply one or more of their compliance mechanisms and enforcement tools to educate the company and or correct non-compliance. And these tools range from notices of non-compliance to actual orders to shut down or to vacate. The AER has a lot of power in relation to its administrative tools. Orders are important tools to prevent, stop, or minimize environmental effects or risks to public safety. And in 22-23, the AER issued 209 orders. And frankly, these numbers indicate a high level of compliance across the industry, and with the majority of non-compliance being for minor or administrative infractions primarily. So, first of all, do you want to know more about inspections? Because I can tell you a little bit more about inspections. Initial inspections are selected based on an enterprise management approach to defining and applying risk, as well as the predetermined level of risk that an activity may pose to health and safety, the type, for instance, of organization or industry it is and where it is and what it's doing, the environment, resource conservation, and stakeholder confidence in the regulatory process. So in other words, people that call in and have issues and believe there are issues. So over the same time frame, 6,535 audits were conducted with 1,038 notices of non-compliance issued. So, sorry. You had some other questions there. Yeah, we did talk a lot about orphan wells, but I'll give you some more information that your friends across the way might like. Closure liabilities for inactive wells are estimated for many different purposes across the entire system. However, it is the responsibility of all operators to properly close their wells and sites, and this government is going forward with a polluter pay principle, which aligns with that perfectly. These are not government liabilities. There are approximately 79,000 inactive wells at the end of 2023 in Alberta, a reduction from approximately 91,000 in 2021. The AER estimates that there's about 60 billion in inactive and active liabilities, and the Orphan Well Association estimates closure liabilities to be 890 million for the Orphan Well program. As of March 31st, 2023, there are 2,253 orphan wells requiring abandonment, and 7,117 orphan sites remain requiring reclamation, and one large facility. So, and we talked about reclamation on Indigenous land. I can't remember, one of your questions was about how performance was measured, and I think it was no. But what I would say to you is that I think we already gave that information to your friend across the way as well, so that's not going to help. And I think that's about it, unless
You want me to speak to divestment?
yeah, well, yes, and I want to talk a little bit about that first, but, I've watched since 2004 attacks on our oil sands industry. I've watched it from, from people climbing my windows outside of Parliament. In fact, now he's a federal minister. I've watched it and throwing banners down saying stop the tar sands. I've seen people do it. It's my home. It's where people work, where people live, and where people have dreams, just like everywhere else they have in Canada, and we have certain expectations. And I would suggest to you that all of these people that make up these fancy rules from their ivory towers across the way don't recognize the importance of what we do and how well we do it. Because if they came over and saw it, they wouldn't take the positions they do. So, and that's part of my job and your job, and I believe the opposition's job, to make sure we stand up for the things that we're doing right and the best in the world. And you know what? And their job, just like your job, is to point it out when we get things wrong. But we are getting things right, and we're seeing changes in the world in relation to that. And I think that some things that drive change is necessity, and one of the necessities right now is energy security. And while the rest of the world is watching what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, or whether it's China and Taiwan, or what's happening in the Middle East or other places, what they know for sure is that we have one of the largest deposits of hydrocarbons in the planet right here, and it's inexpensive. And we're a free country that enables people to come here and create jobs, create wealth, and take advantage of it. And I think as a result of that and the good work we do with the men and women on our sites with Indigenous communities and with environmental regulation and cleanup, we will be the winners of this argument, because people can't ignore the obvious. And whether it's our great relationships with our partners, as I mentioned, the Indigenous folks, or whether it's us working through our files and making sure we're always the best in the world at what we do, sooner or later the rest of the world will see that, and the banking community will see it. But we have to respond to that, and that's why this government is taking serious initiatives with CCUS. We're looking at net zero opportunities, and we're working with our industry to make sure we provide that if that's what the world needs. And by 2050, the world is moving in that direction, and we're moving along with them. Deputy, you want to add anything to that, Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I think I would just echo that Alberta is clearly a global leader in energy. We punch, frankly, in my view, above our weight. As far as low impact investment, we are one of the world's most responsible energy producers, and with some of the highest environmental and human standards in the world, and we should be extremely proud of that. As the minister touched on, we've made massive commitments. We were the first jurisdiction in Canada to put a price on carbon. And that is something that I think few people sort of recognize from this jurisdiction, how we have been such a leader in regards to doing the first pricing, the very first carbon capture projects in North America. We have undoubtedly, as the minister said, some of the greatest opportunity to be a world leader in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And we have set a path for that relative to both the scope of work that we have done on our hubs. We have 25 hubs now that have been approved across many jurisdictions across the province. We are currently working on finalizing both the sequestration agreements as well as the ability to have the guidelines put in place for the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program.
Thank you very much. You do have 4 minutes and 40 seconds left if you got some more questions. Do you got more?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Good. I'll come back to reclamation because we just haven't talked about this enough. Do you have a timeline for reclaiming the orphan well sites that are out there? Now there's 79,000, I hear. That's a lot. So do you have a plan, and if so, can you share what that plan is going forward and what the timeline will be and an approximate cost for these orphan wells? And to come back to the abandoned pipelines, if you could speak to those, there's a lot of them as well, which actually was a bit of a surprise to me. And so could you expound a little bit more on that, the cost with that, and why there are such a significant amount of them? What is being done in response to those? That's it.
I
I
guess
think you said a lot.
is okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, so you can answer them, I guess.
First of all, just to recognize that I think last year we did 9% of the total, thereabouts, which is a true accomplishment. And as I mentioned before as well, it takes time for reclamation certificates to come about, for you to grow the vegetation, to wait for it to happen, to reclaim the site, to move the stuff off that needs to be, in some cases that's not able to stay there for whatever reason. And so I think what we're going to find is, we're 9% last year. I think as reclamation takes place going forward, I think some years we'll see a bounce, and some years we won't. The truth is, I think we have to continue to row in that direction as a government, at the same time recognizing that the polluters have to pay for this, and ultimately it's industry that is going to pay for it. So. But there are some, and I'm never too surprised. But I heard this morning again that there's a lot of federal government responsibility that's being left at the table here. In particular, I learned again that many of the reserves around Alberta First Nations land have assets on them that the federal government isn't even aware of. They have no record of them. So how can they allocate money to clean them up? And I think. As Alberta moves forward as the example in Canada and frankly the world on reclaiming these sites, reclaiming them. I think what we need to see is the federal government coming to the table, not just in Alberta, but that's what I'm concerned with, because there's a lot of people out there that have these sites that have their kids around them and that are interfering in opportunities for housing and other things I heard this morning. And I think it's time that, other jurisdictions besides Alberta took it seriously. And so working with our partners, we can do that. But the truth is, if you look at the rate it's going to take a few years to get there, and we have to make sure that taxpayers aren't going to be on the hook for it. So timeline, if I give a timeline and I'm not here, I'm off the hook probably. So I would say sometime around then. Does that answer your questions?
Did you have something you want to say, or is that it?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, you're
Thank
good. All right, we will carry on to the next block. Just before we do, I just want to let everyone know we'll take our 5-minute break after this block. So we'll go 20 minutes. MLA Dick has got the target. I guess you're going block?
Well, I would love to go block.
Okay,
So
well,
let's
perfect.
let's
Then
do
we're
it.
on the same
Minister,
page
is that okay? You don't want to switch?
What? Finally. Somebody that agrees with me.
Okay, so we'll start with the 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you all the staff for being here tonight, giving up your evening in order to be here. So, Minister, I've got a couple questions here. My first question is on the natural gas vision and strategy in the hydrogen roadmap, particularly in the hydrogen sector. This is on the Ministry Business Plan on page 45, and the key objective 1.2. So part of my question is that Alberta is the largest hydrogen producer in Canada. We know this. We know that we have the resources. We know that we have the expertise. And we also know that we have the technology in order to really become a world leader in this. This is super, to me, this is super important for the future of Alberta. It's clean. We know that it's low cost hydrogen. And in the future, we know that this market is going to be in the trillions of dollars, which is significant right across the globe. By 2050, prospectively, $2.5 trillion, if not more. And we also know that hydrogen can be the next great energy source that fuels jobs, it fuels our economy, it fuels investment right across our province. These are major impact for our province. And this is the National Clean Hydrogen Strategy and Roadmap. We realize this is a comprehensive framework. And we are accelerating the production, the processing, the delivery, the storage, and use of clean hydrogen. It's all excellent. This is versatile. It's flexible. It's an energy that can be produced with low to zero carbon emissions. And as I said, a huge amount of world impact, from $2.5 trillion to up to $11 trillion world market, which is by 2050. We are, like I said, the largest producer of hydrogen in Canada, and this is suggested by research that how Alberta can produce some of the lowest cost clean hydrogen in the very world. So here's my questions. The development of hydrogen, as listed under your key objective, has been a ministry priority for a few years now. What work has been done to implement the hydrogen roadmap to date? What results have been activated, and what is planned for 2024 and 2025? My this next question is in a similar vein on the hydrogen blending. The Alberta Utilities Commission produced a report on hydrogen blending in 2022, I believe, and regarding this report, we have several significant advantages that we can produce clean hydrogen made by upgrading natural gas. We have an abundance here in Alberta. We also know that any carbon byproduct generated from this process is then captured and permanently stored through CCUS potential or used for other purposes. This is all excellent. And we've made exciting progress on this file, and I believe that there's more opportunity for progress too as well. Now, the roadmap specifically identifies hydrogen blending at 15 to 20% by volume into the natural gas distribution network as early and important market for hydrogen ambitions. And so here's my questions. What is the work planned in the near term on this? What is the timeline to see hydrogen blending or blended into the natural gas utility system? And do you see Grand Prairie and area being part of the future of hydrogen development? And just one final question here on the LNG opportunities. We know that we are significant in our LNG, natural gas production. We are top 5 producer in the world. I believe we produce 2/3 of Canada's production comes out of Alberta, which is incredible. And we're well positioned to take that growth and expand that too through hydrogen and LNG. So just to get straight to my questions here, to the under LNG opportunities, several points in the key objective here speak of taking advantage of liquefied natural gas opportunities and achieving new market access. So what initiatives will the ministry advance in the near term to enable the sector? And would you provide a status update on projects that are proposed or under construction? And I would like also to cede my time to MLA McDougall to carry on some further questioning of our minister.
Thank you. So I'm just going to go back to some of the conversation that came up earlier on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And this is, of course, consistent with the key objective 1.2 on page 45. So Alberta, as you say, is a global leader in carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and continues to lead the way in the development of this game-changing technology. The demand for CCS is increasing around the world. We hear a lot about that. And we're well positioned to capitalize on these emerging opportunities, as you have pointed out, to reduce emissions of the industry. And there's a pathway that we need to be taking, and Alberta can help with that transition to that low carbon future. So as you mentioned, that Alberta is the first jurisdiction in Canada that will have an established regulatory and risk management framework in place for this large scale CCS projects that we envision. It's exciting news, and importantly, we have the workforce and we have the expertise. We have the competitive advantage in this area relative to the rest of the world, because we've been looking at this for quite a while. So I see on the 24-27 capital plan on page 2, $54.8 million in capital spending has been allocated to carbon capture and storage initiative. And I'd like to ask a few questions related to this spending. First of all, can the minister first speak to the role CCUS might play in both domestic and global emissions reduction, and also reflect on the opportunity for this to help drive Alberta's economy in the future? Secondly, specifically, what are the projects or initiatives that will be funded by this $54.8 million investment, and what benefits can Albertans expect from this? And compared to other competitor jurisdictions, and we're well aware of the massive amount of subsidies that our neighbor to the south is putting on the table in terms of a number of carbon emission initiatives, how does Alberta measure up with regard to the adoption of CCS within the energy sector? Because this is going to be a major competitor for us. And how do we ensure that we are competitive at attracting the CCUS investment? And related to this, my understanding is that when I'm talking to some of the players that are involved in the Pathway Group and involved in CCS, they're waiting for the federal government to come clean on what exactly it's prepared to put on the table and some details and specifics on that. So my understanding is that they understand Alberta's position on this, but they're waiting for the federal government, which it seems a little bit hypocritical since the federal government is criticizing the lack of faster progress on this. And so if you would speak to us a little bit about what exactly are we waiting for the federal government to come forward with, what are the details that we need to know so the industry can move forward? And finally, what is the regulatory framework that governs CCUS in Alberta, and how are local landowners and Indigenous communities involved in these processes? Further on that, Alberta has one of the best and most abundant geological settings in Canada and perhaps the world. I think that's my understanding of what you're saying. Given the Western Canada Sedimentary Basin and the characteristics of that, and which is huge, of course, because that extends all the way from British Columbia all to Manitoba. That's a huge amount of property that land that for putting and getting rid of some of the CO2 or in sequestering in that. And we have a program, the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program. And can you speak to us about what exactly the ACCIP program, what does it do to attract CCUS investment? How did it address the concerns about the competitiveness for Alberta compared to other jurisdictions? And how does the government ensure industry and investors are aware of the cumulative impacts of the program and these federal programs and the provincial tax advantage and other incentives that make CCUS investment decisions? I mean, what are we doing to make sure that everybody understands, including the financiers around the world, what exactly and why they should be investing in Alberta for these type of things? And when will the ACCIP be open for applications?
Okay, thank you very much. Minister, you have 10 minutes to respond.
Excellent. And if you don't mind, Mr. Chair and members, I'll start with the last questions and work my way to the front. A lot of meat and potatoes there for sure. I would say that I'm very excited about Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program, ACIP, because it's the terms have not been finished yet, but I will tell you in general it's going to follow the 12% of APIP, and so the money will follow the construction 3 years over. That's generally how it's designed, but the specifics have not yet been totally ironed out. But you're right, we've got one of the best geologies in the world for this opportunity, and the world's asking for this. So use our competitive advantages to go forward. I think it's a great opportunity for us. It's grant funding for facilities to incorporate CCUS technology into their operations. So for those of you not familiar with the program itself, if you spend $100 on a particular project, once you're done, you get 12.5% back, 12% back on that, and that'll be over a 3-year period in equal installments. So Albertans get, I would suggest, a return on investment before Alberta actually pays the money back. That's debatable depending on the type of industry, but for the most part, it's a great opportunity for us to showcase what we're doing here. I will tell you that I met with an individual from the Ministry of, from India today, and I can't remember the specific ministry that he represented, but we talked about the opportunity to actually have an MOU on CCUS because they were very interested in what we're doing here, and we're so far advanced on any other jurisdiction. And it doesn't matter whether I talk to people from the government of India or people from Korea or even Ontario. They're all envious about our current situation here with our geology, and they're very excited about some of the opportunities that we have with industry. And for people that don't know what the opportunities are, if we can abate our industries here, which some industries don't have any other choice but to be abated because they can't reduce their emissions dramatically without it, and that includes oil and gas, cement industry, generation industry. Without the ability to abate it, they will continue to emit or be higher emitters. So, we have right here, because of our geology and our situation, we have the opportunity to be the first abated oil field in the world. Right here, the oil sands. We have the opportunity to abate all of our natural gas sites and petrochemical sites for manufacturing and for production. That in itself is what the world is demanding, and if we can do that, and we can do it in a good way, we have natural gas, which is a miracle, and it can truly power our economy for many, many years and create many industries here utilizing both our CCUS and our natural gas and other opportunities. So people that ignore CCUS as an opportunity for Alberta certainly do so without recognizing where the world is going, and the world is going along this route. I think you also asked a few other questions relating to the federal government, our good friends I'm the vice chair in charge of good relations with the federal government, and I have to say that, you know, our work is cut out for us. But if they come to the table with CCUS, with Pathways, for instance, it's going to be the largest single investment in Alberta's history by the private sector, and their tune is only about 18 billion. But with the federal government's portion of income tax credits with ITCs and with the contract for differences, we're going to see some major investment in northeastern Alberta towards abatement of a huge amount of industries, and it's very exciting. I mean, Dow picked us for a reason over any other site in the world because for their first net zero polyethylene cracker, because they know they can be net zero here, and that's what they want to be. So I would just say to you that the exciting opportunities that are here, if the federal government comes to the table as a partner with the ITCs, which I talked to Minister Wilkinson last week, and he seemed to indicate that they were at the threshold of getting that ironed out, and they come up with a contract for differences, then we're going to see Canada lead the world on CCUS for sure, and Alberta be the leader there. Speaking of which, I've only got 5 minutes left, and I want to be respectful of MLA Dick and the questions that he asked, because what could be more important than the future? And the future is, of course, for many countries, Korea, Japan, and other Asian countries, hydrogen. Hydrogen is exciting because we're a world leader at hydrogen. Who would have known that we get to be a world leader? So many things here in a population with 4.6 million people. And we're taking advantage of what we have, and we're doing a great job on it. Now, as you're aware, in November 2021, Alberta's hydrogen roadmap became a key part of our path to building a provincial clean hydrogen economy and accessing global markets. And I would encourage those people that haven't had the chance to look at it to take a closer look at it, because it outlines the steps we're taking to support the sector as technology and markets develop. And I will tell you that when I went to Korea a year ago almost, I was surprised to see vehicles driving down the highway with hydrogen stickers and hydrogen refueling stations. I was surprised to see that, but Korea has moved ahead. I think they have 30 or 40,000 cars and many sites that are around Korea that are producing hydrogen, and fill-up stations where you have your gas at one and your hydrogen at another. The world is moving that way, and how does Alberta take advantage of that? Well, we have this amazing cheap feedstock called natural gas, which you produce a lot of in Grand Prairie, and which we're hoping that you take advantage of this hydrogen opportunity, because it is an opportunity, and because of the nature of hydrogen, we have to be very careful on how we ship it. And you're in a great opportunity along those lines too, to ship it out to northern BC. And it just so happens that right now there's a move. We're talking to the federal government at the Alberta tables on how we can get this hydrogen to marketplaces like Korea and Japan, who are demanding and asking for it from all the world because they need it, and they know they do. So do you have an opportunity in Grand Prairie to take advantage of it? Well, knowing Grand Prairie as I do, I would say that not only do you have an opportunity, but you will take advantage of that opportunity, whether it's to build out infrastructure for rail and to work with CN and our other rail partners to get the infrastructure they need, because you have to slow down the cars. You can't go quite as fast as you can with regular freight. You have to slow down the cars, and you have to be careful. You have to mix it properly because it's volatile, and we don't want to have something happen like a national disaster along that rail line. So we want to make sure we get it right, and that's what, as you know, what we do here in Alberta. So we're collaborating with the province of British Columbia. Because it's a tripartite opportunity here, BC, Alberta, and the federal government, and hopefully we're going to have that ironed out in a little while. I don't know, this is the man that does the twisting at the table. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Larry, but it is an exciting opportunity, isn't it?
Thank you, Chair. It is an exciting opportunity. Thank you, Minister. And yeah, we are working very closely with the federal government in regards to looking at both terms of reference between ourselves and the government of British Columbia, as well as the federal government, to begin discussions at a high level on how we can move forward with a substantial increase in the amount of hydrogen and ammonia that would move to the West Coast. Japan has auctions forthcoming, one in May with Japan, and then in the fall with South Korea, and then in the spring of 2025 again with Japan. They are looking for substantial amounts of ammonia, and they're looking for exactly what Alberta can provide, which is both the right kind of ammonia that actually has a much lower CO2 content as well as a lower nitrogen content, and the ability for us to be able to provide that reliably, responsibly, safely, and in support of our Indigenous communities, I might add. We are going to be working very closely with both the federal government and British Columbia. Very early days, but there is some momentum. We would like to get to where we can provide a signal to the marketplace. I think it's fair to say that our partners in Japan and Asia are looking at this as maybe a do-over after the federal government's, I would suggest, their inability to see a business case for LNG. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity to do that. We have a tremendous number of projects that are forthgoing right now on hydrogen. The Heartland Generation is planning its first large-scale 100% hydrogen power generation facility, producing 400 megawatts of baseload electricity. We've got Air Products, which of course has announced and has already broken ground.
Yeah, always run out. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to take our 5-minute break right now, so we'll be back at 9:01, and we will start promptly at that time. Thank you very much. second round, and I'll just explain, I'm learning about how to do this, but in the first round, we concede time to the next person, and we had times there where we didn't use all the time, and we came back, which got a bit awkward, but it's, I will look at that in future for future meetings. But this next patch, you've got 5 minutes to ask your questions. If you don't use the 5 minutes, then you lose it. And then we move on, and they got 5 minutes to answer. If they don't use it all, then they lose it. And I've noticed that the independent member has moved on, so we'll be going back and forth between the governing party and the opposition party. So given that, we'll go to the speaking rotation, and opposition, you have 5 minutes to ask your questions.
Okay, well,
Well, you're okay for block time again?
the,
Block? Yeah. Yeah, okay.
yeah, I feel he's made his
Yeah,
decision,
no, I
so it's
think
good.
so. Okay, perfect.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm going with the theme of the Alberta carbon capture incentive. So this is a good alignment with the questions. On page 92 of the fiscal plan, the document highlights that $167 million is allocated to the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program from the Tier Fund over the next 3 fiscal years. So 2024, 2025, 2026 to 2027. And a note that the cumulative amount available for Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program would be $226 million. On page 93 of the fiscal plan, it says, quote, funding from the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program will be available once the federal government has legislated its investment tax credit for CCOs. And you've already said that earlier. But I just want to confirm here, as I understand it here, the implementation of the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program would depend on the province having full clarity on contracts for difference from the federal government. Can you confirm if that's the case? And can you also clarify to us how the different programs will interact? And also when will all the details of the program be available to investors and Albertans? And to what extent are you exploring a potential provincial model for contracts for difference? On page 110 of the fiscal plan, it mentions that, quote, funding for the ASAP projects will be included in a future capital plan as the program provides provincial financial support only after the construction of an eligible project is complete, end quote. So if I understand this right, you're saying capital support will be paid out once a project is complete, similar to the Alberta Petrochemicals Incentive Program, or APEP. So can you explain what the money budgeted is for this year and in the next 2 years, and how much is expected to be spent on? It just seems surprising that anyone would be able to build a project under this program, given that not all details of the program are public right now. And according to the fiscal plan on page 92, it highlights tier spending, which shows that last year the allocation for innovation and the technology and carbon capture and storage projects are underspent. And that in the years 2025, 2026, and 2026 to 2027, the spending in that line item will be lower. So I guess, why is it underspent? And second, have you done any analysis to what extent this will be impacting energy companies looking to lower their emissions or invest in decarbonization opportunities? And then under capital grants, that's under 4.3 of the estimates, it looks like the Alberta Petrochemicals Incentive Program will be underspent this year. The funds flow only when projects become operational. Can you give us a sense which project was delayed in becoming operational and for how long and why? And then quickly, I was happy to see the comment on TIER from the Deputy Minister. I just want to start by reinforcing that Yes, Alberta was the first jurisdiction to introduce carbon pricing for industry in 2007. It was also improved later on under the Alberta NDP government, and that's why we have multi-billion dollars of investments. It puts a price on emissions, as you have mentioned, and I was happy to see that your government confirmed it would follow the federal carbon price schedule to reach $170 per ton by 2030. That's good. Your support for the industrial carbon tax is very welcome. Now, your colleagues also talked and asked about how do we get investors to come? And I'm curious if you have any plans to strengthen TIER and clarify that beyond the 2030 dates to show investors that certainty to invest in carbon capture and storage. Alberta could broaden TIER's coverage to smaller emitters. It could lower the benchmark, increase the tightening rate. So I'm curious if you're thinking in that holistic approach to show investor certainty to investors to come and invest in CCUS. And I'd love your answers around how do you show that policy certainty to make long-term project investments in technologies like carbon capture and storage.
Thank you, Minister. You have 5 minutes to answer.
Thank you very much. And, I remember the dark days of the NDP government and people fleeing our province and being encouraged to go there by a then minister of the NDP to leave the province and go to BC. So I do remember some things you brought in, and most of it was regulation that drove our population net migration to the negative, I think, consistently for almost 3.5 years. But fortunately, we don't have to worry about that now. And if we do, and I appreciate your interest in ASIP and in relation to policy and along these lines, and if it is true that if the federal Liberals who are propped up by your boss Jagmeet keep their promises on the ITCs, so I'd encourage you to talk to him. The NDP's one party, and there's no question of that, and it supports them on the contract for differences. Alberta's oil sands will be the first carbon-abated major oil field in the world, and we have tremendous possibilities that come from that. And the promise of that, based upon where the world is going right now, is amazing. And Pathways, which you may have heard of, wants to do this. Alberta wants to do this, and Ottawa says they want to do this. And we just have to hopefully their action is as big as what they promise. And maybe you can talk to your federal leader and see if he can make that as part of his condition to prop up the federal Liberals and our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Because I really do believe that the CCUS will play a critical role to help Canada and, frankly, the world reach emission reduction targets. And as you did point out, we do have expertise on drilling as well as CCUS, and we're going to continue to work with our industry partners, including Pathways. But, of course, if we don't get the federal government at the table, we will not attract the investment and the change that we need in order to continue on with the growth that we do have and we expect. So the other key component to recognize is that it will also play a critical role in developing our economy over the coming years because of the nature of our inputs and just frankly our environment. So I think that CCUS will help us a lot in relation to that. Now, for tier funding, you're going to have to talk to EPA, the Minister of Environment, because she deals with that, and how she deals with that would be between her and her mandate, but it's not within mine. So now, I think the $54 million you referred to, your question was, is in relation to the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line and Quest. It's not in relation to ASIP because it hasn't been developed so far. So I think that funding's there from that, if I'm not wrong. I did want to also point out that we've already invested about $1.8 billion to support projects and programs over the past decade. We didn't get to be world leader by not taking those risks, and frankly, those risks have paid off very well for us. And over the next decade, the job incentives, somewhere in the neighborhood of $35 billion in new investments over 10 years. And that's about 21,000 great paying jobs here in Alberta. And this program that we're developing right now, the design itself is underway, and it's going to attract billions of dollars in new investments, as well as create many, many jobs in a variety of sectors, including clean tech. And we believe we'll be a world leader on all of these initiatives, and it'll encourage the opportunities for clean tech to actually come from Alberta as well and use our competitive advantages to do that. We're right now asking stakeholders for feedback to ensure the program will be reflective of what industry needs and what they want, as well as recognizing what Alberta's priorities are in relation to reducing emissions while protecting public and environmental safety. The ACIP program itself gives 12% back, as I mentioned before, and it does it, you're right, when the construction is finished and the project is underway. And it does so by way of 4% over a 3-year period. I think those were all the questions. I have 26 seconds left. I'd like to turn it back over to them.
We go to the next one. So our next one, go to the government side, and we have MLA Armstrong Hubnick. You have 5 minutes to ask your questions.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Minister, I'm going to be talking about the Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program. And I'm going to be referring to page 45, key objective 1.2, enable and accelerate opportunities in emerging resources and the energy transition by advancing the development of carbon capture, utilization, and storage to support industry in creating lower carbon products that will be more competitive in the global market. My constituency of Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville is home to Alberta's industrial heartland, which provides direct employment to many of my constituents and supports the livelihoods of so many more. And so I know firsthand the importance of the energy sector to Alberta. Alberta has a tremendous opportunity to capitalize on the growing global petrochemical sector and diversify the province's economy with her abundant natural gas reserves and a competitive investor-friendly business environment. This is why I'm so glad that Alberta's government has been focused on attracting more investment and creating more jobs in the energy sector. The Alberta Industrial Heartland Association estimates that Alberta's petrochemical industry could attract $30 billion in total investments between 2020 and 2030. Alberta is home to Canada's largest petrochemical manufacturing industry, and there will be a continued interest in large-scale projects for decades to come. The Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program, or APIP, which is outlined on page 74 of the estimates, is a key part of Alberta's natural gas vision and strategy to turn the province into a top global producer of petrochemicals. So, a question to the ministers. Minister, can you please share with the committee how APIP is helping to position Alberta as a world leader in petrochemicals by attracting local and global investment in new and expanded market-driven petrochemical facilities? And I see under line item 4.3 of the Energy and Minerals estimates that there is an increase of over $3.7 million in 2024-2025 APIP funding compared to the 2023-24 forecast. Minister, can you please share some of these projections, some of the projects this additional funding will go towards, and how this funding will help create jobs for Albertans? APIP is simply one part of the broader strategy to grow petrochemicals and create jobs for Albertans. How does APIP contribute and interact with other elements of key objectives 1.1 from the 2024 to 2027 business plan, which is to support the competitiveness in Alberta's energy, mineral, and subsurface resource sector? Could you provide a brief update on current approved and under construction projects under the program? And looking ahead to 2024-25, are you seeing continued interest from the industry in the program? So my next question will be on the petrochemical sector. This is Government of Alberta's 2024 to 27 strategic plan, page 9. Priority number 1 of this government's 2024-2027 strategic plan is boosting Alberta's advantage. One major aspect of this is strengthening economic activity and attracting investments. I think we all recognize that a strong petrochemical sector is essential to Alberta's ability to accomplish this. In fact, on page 9 of the strategic plan speaks to the importance of making Alberta one of the top 10 petrochemical producers in the world through private sector investment. I'm proud that Dow is investing nearly $9 billion in my constituency of Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville through the Path to Zero project, which will supply certified low to zero carbon emissions polyethylene and ethylene derivatives to customers across the globe. This is one of the largest private sector's investments in Alberta's history and will create 6,000 jobs during peak construction and about 400 to 500 full-time jobs when fully operational. Minister, could you please speak to the impact of this project will have not only to supporting the local economy and creating jobs, but to also positioning Alberta as a petrochemical superpower and attracting further investment from multinational companies? And more broadly, could you highlight some of the work of your ministry has done towards the priority 1 of the strategic plan and discuss the path ahead when it comes to making Alberta a top 10 global petrochemical producer? And the next one I'm going to be speaking about is the federal emissions cap, and its budget line reference, page 46, key objective 2.1. It states that energy and minerals will maintain, enforce, and enhance provincial jurisdiction and regulatory certainty of Alberta's energy and mineral sources. The federal government introduced a proposed framework to cap production from Canada's oil and gas sector. However, we know that greenhouse gas emissions cap will devastate the oil and gas industry and will drive away investment and hobble Alberta's economy. The initiative proposes to cap emissions at 35 to 38% below the 2019 levels by the year.
Thank you, member. Okay, Minister, you have 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you, and thank you, member, for the questions in relation to your riding. It's, I was there for that exciting Dow announcement, and people wonder how I best describe APIP. It's world class. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Dow here making that kind of investment. And you talked about $9 billion. Well, that's phase 1. There's 2 more phases that I'm hoping they're going to invest, which will bring the total investment over $16 billion. Those are numbers. And we talk about 16 billion, we talk about 9 billion, we talk about 3 billion. What does that mean? Well, what it means is we're going to have a lot of good jobs here in Alberta. We're going to have better schools, better hospitals, better roads, a better workforce, people that have a better quality of life. That's what it's all about. We've already announced more than 800 million in funding grants that ensuring we capitalize on multi-million dollar, billion-dollar opportunities in this particular sector. And, the first net zero polyethylene cracker in the world that can abate 100% of their GHGs, that's pretty amazing, and it's going to be right here in Edmonton, just outside of Edmonton. Now, have we got interest? Well, yes, we have tons of interest. In fact, I didn't come up with the slogan world class. That was somebody from a foreign country that actually identified it for me and called it world class because they looked at all the other incentives. And, we're landlocked here in Alberta, but we still seem to be able to compete for these incredible opportunities and win. And I think we're going to see that for a long time. Energy and Minerals, in partnership with Invest Alberta and some other stakeholders, are currently working with potential investors from Canada, of course, but also from France, Japan, and the United States. Since 2020 and its launch, local and international investors have shown increasing interest in the program, and as they become more aware of it, because many people aren't aware of it. Different types of petrochemical projects have applied for APIP so far, including hydrogen, ammonia, which of course is a carrier, fertilizer, methanol, propane to polyethylene, gas to liquid, and other types of projects. Projects that have submitted initial applications so far represent almost $39 billion in total investments, representing over 60,000 potential construction jobs and over 2,400 permanent jobs. So how does it translate? Well, these numbers, these billions of dollars, translates into a lot of people wanting to come to Alberta because they can have a better quality of life. The first approved project under APIP was Interpipeline's Heartland Petrochemical Complex, which you also get to brag about. It converts propane to polyethylene and is the first of its kind in North America. The project was approved for a total of $408 million in grants to be paid over 3 installments, as I mentioned. And, we see a number of other projects. The second approved APIP was Air Products, a $1.6 billion hydrogen facility. I don't know if I mentioned previously, but Alberta leads Canada in hydrogen, and Canada leads the world as one of the major hydrogen producers. So we have a lot of opportunity here, and with a cheap feedstock as we have, we have amazing options. The project, Air Projects Products, is a $161.5 million grant under APIP, and it's expected to create over 2,400 jobs during its construction. It's expected to finish construction this year. Dow, $32.5 million in funding support under APIP. The project was worth $299 million and created about 400 construction jobs, and that was its expansion in Fort Saskatchewan. It wasn't the big one we were talking about earlier. Rocky Mountain Clean Fuels, approved for $20.8 million for its Carsland gas to liquid GTL plant, designed to convert natural gas into fuels. It entered operations in late 2022, and the project was worth about $173 million and created about 670 construction jobs and 15 permanent jobs. I've talked about the Dow's path to net zero, and that is just, we could talk all day about how big that's going to be to Alberta and in particular Edmonton. Looking ahead to 24-25, since its launch, we've seen a lot of people very interested in, as I mentioned, hydrogen, methanol, propane to polyethylene, gas to liquid, and other types of projects. We've received 21 applications since it began in 2020. And, you know, sometimes we have people criticize this program, but frankly, it's hundreds and thousands of jobs and better quality of life for all Albertans. So as long as we do it right and get it right, which we will, it's going to be right for Alberta.
Okay, thank you, Minister. We now go to the opposition side. You have 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I want to go to page 45 of the Energy Ministry's business plan. That's key objective 1.1 that states, quote, engaging with global partners to firmly establish Alberta as an integral, reliable partner in global energy security and transition, end quote. We talked about CCUS and petrochemicals as one tool or some tools in the toolbox towards transition and diversification. This is all positive. Yet your government banned geothermal energy for 7 months with the unfathomable moratorium on renewables. So for starters, Minister, how do you square your government boasting about geothermal energy and that you're trying to attract investments when you actually banned geothermal development right here in Alberta? My biggest question to you, how are the rules developed by the AER under your ministry being impacted by the new rules around renewable energy development? The uncertainty around the new renewable energy rules are immense, and we don't even know what they mean at the moment. So there's that interaction between the AER and the new rules. Has the AER or the department undertaken any analysis on the impact on investment for the geothermal sector in that regard? And building on all this, we currently have 2 incentive programs, the Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program and the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program, but we don't have a single structural incentive for geothermal. On page 93 of your fiscal plan, you mentioned the 12% incentive for CCUS, and I'm curious, have you considered any incentives for geothermal? Have you considered matching this investment tax credit for geothermal or even other sources? Mr. Chair, you see, we are in a race to attract low carbon investments. The Inflation Reduction Act in the US, policies in Europe, and even the Middle East are transforming the energy industry's outlook and the energy investment space. Capital is flowing in places where there is policy certainty and where jurisdictions signal that they understand we live in a carbon-conscious future because of climate change. We're not just competing with the US, we're competing for capital worldwide. And while Canada will probably not be able to match the deep pockets of the Inflation Reduction Act that subsidize low-carbon technologies through taxpayer money, Alberta, as we've discussed, have the Technology, Innovation, and Emissions Reduction Tier System, which manages the emissions from the industry. We have revenue. It gets reinvested in emission-reducing technology. So my question to you, Minister, and through you, Mr. Chair, have the government and the ministry looked at the incentives and investment tax credits offered by the Inflation Reduction Act on geothermal energy? What are the opportunities that we can explore for our province in this space? We do not need to reinvent the wheel. So, I mean, it was a positive start in your speech on diversification, and I'm curious what you're doing in this space. What else I want to ask you here? Can we share? No, we can't share. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna stop right here.
You have 5 minutes to answer.
Thank you very much. And you know, speaking of opening up my mail and seeing what's in front of me, Albertans over the last couple of years have been opening up their energy bills. And they can thank the NDP and the accelerated shutdown of coal for those high energy bills and why we almost had our grid shut down just over the last year. So, you know, I will not take lessons on what to do right from the NDP in relation to geothermal. But I appreciate the question, and I want to give it the respect it deserves because it is an opportunity. And in fact, it is a good opportunity for us. But and I'm not going to get into renewables because the stability of the grid was, you know, that's where I'll leave it. But that is not my file. That is somebody else's file, and I will leave that minister to answer in relation to the renewables. But I will tell you that right now we lead the country with renewables, and we lead the country with applications for more renewables. So it must be the regulatory body here in Alberta. They know that when we make the rules, we make them right, we make them certain, and we make them predictable so that people can invest properly and get a return on investment. And I will tell you from a government perspective that the government welcomes market-driven renewables like wind and solar and hydro, geothermal and biomass, as long as they can compete with other forms of power production. Alberta's longstanding commitment to a fair, efficient, and openly competitive electricity market has, up until recently, and as I mentioned, the accelerated shutdown of coal, created the conditions for fair market-based renewables to expand and be profitable within Alberta. And frankly, up until the decision by the NDP government, we had the lowest, or some of the lowest electricity rates of anywhere in North America. But, you know, there are some pilot projects in Alberta that have received over $50 million in funding from several sources, including Natural Resources Canada and Alberta Innovates. And I wanted to talk about 4 of the projects that are geothermal projects that are currently going on in Alberta. And I will tell the member I'm interested in this because there's some good opportunities here and there's really good technology. Speaking of technology, one of our technologies actually went to, I understand, and I don't see it in my notes here, but went to Germany and now is a major production facility there for a city in Germany. And I mean, Terrapin geothermal power project, also known as Greenview, will be the first conventional geothermal energy facility in the province. Congratulations, Grand Prairie. It's going to consist of a well-filled electrical generation plant and district heat use infrastructure. I don't have a lot of time to go through it all, but it's pretty exciting. It's going to commence in 2024, and it's a $90 million project, and it's received funding from different sources, 300 indirect and direct jobs. We have Everlight, a demonstration project, Ever Technologies, which has the Everloop, which I think is the successful proponent that went to Europe and has an active commercial scale facility there. Again, Emissions Reduction Alberta and Alberta Innovate each committed $1 million to that project. Razor Energy Oil geothermal co-production project. In 2023, Razor Energy 1 announced the successful completion of its co-produced geothermal and natural gas hybrid power project in Swan Hills. And Novus Earth Latitude 53 geothermal project is proposed to build a geothermal project near Hinton. Frankly, here's one more out of the town of Rainbow Lake in northwestern Alberta. You know, we have a very competitive marketplace. We have the infrastructure, and frankly, we have the investment opportunities that people want to take advantage of. We have some of the lowest taxes in North America, the lowest in commercial taxes, business taxes in Canada. We have incredible universities that generate some of the highest educated people on the planet. And that's why we have all these incredible companies that come into Alberta and have startups that are actually incredibly successful along the geothermal, the wind, the solar, and other opportunities because they have the right government making good regulatory decisions in the best interests of their population. And what can I say but that we will continue to work with our partners in industry across Alberta to provide them the regulatory certainty and, frankly, the incredible people of Alberta to run their projects, to create more projects, and to continue to invest so that the world is a better place, because more Alberta energy, whether it be natural gas, clean burning energy, or whether it be wind or solar, more Alberta energy out in the public is better for the world.
Very much, Minister. We'll now go to the government side, and MLA Hunter, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here and your colleagues with you. I'm interested in the plastics circular economy. I noticed that when the federal government lost their court challenge, when we won the court challenge with their plastics program that they had, that they want to continue to ban the plastics industry in this province and across the country. So my question to you on the plastic circular economy that we have, the development of a plastic circular economy is listed as a priority key objective 1.2 and so in the past year we've seen the federal court ruling that the federal government's unilateral decision to label plastics as toxic was both unreasonable and unconstitutional, followed by a federal government appeal of that decision, as I was saying earlier. Could you explain how the court decision and subsequent appeal affects Alberta? And then secondly, can you help us understand, Ottawa obviously cannot assume regulatory authority over any substance simply by designating it as toxic. And you've stated many times in the House that you will be pushing back, and we will be pushing back, and so has the Premier stated that, against Ottawa's unconstitutional actions. But what steps is this government taking to fight back against the federal government, specifically on that appeal? I'd also like to ask, well, actually, according to reports, 86% of plastics were landfilled in 2016. This represents a potential $7.8 billion economic opportunity. As I understand it, approximately 4,500 direct full-time equivalent jobs are created in the province because of existing recycling activities, with a further 1,600 indirect and 1,400 induced jobs, for a total of 7,500 jobs according to recent studies. Also, to add, there is an opportunity to grow this sector by more than $30 billion by 2030, resulting in more than 90,000 direct and indirect jobs over the construction and operation periods of new facilities. According to the Alberta Industrial Heartland Association, this would generate more than $10 billion in revenue for the government of Alberta from corporate and personal income taxes. So to the Minister, can you explain how work on the plastic circular economy relates to petrochemical development in Alberta? Now, in your ministry business plan, page 46, key objective 2.2, the ministry will, it states, collaborate with other ministries within the integrated resource management system to maintain and strengthen a balanced, responsible approach to managing the impacts of resource development. Energy and Minerals Management manages the non-renewable energy sources, including coal, minerals, natural gas, petrochemical, conventional oil, oil sands, and geothermal. And Albertans know that Energy and Minerals has two main functions. First, granting industry the right to explore and develop energy and mineral resources in abundance with regional plans. Second, contributing to the development of regional plans through strategy development that ensures Alberta's long-term economic prosperity. What my constituents would like to better understand is how Energy and Minerals collaborate with other ministries. And so, and what initiatives will be advanced under this key objective that I just asked about. I wanted to also ask on line page 45, key objective 1.2, it states, enable and accelerate opportunities in emerging resources in the energy transition by advancing the development of carbon capture, utilization, and storage to support industries in creating lower carbon products that will be more competitive in the global market. So the question to you is, what are some of the priorities for the regulatory optimization over the next year? And are there specific emission reduction technologies the government is targeting?
Thank you, Member. Minister, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. I know, we've served together for some period of time, and I know, like you're frustrated with things that don't make sense. You know, like paying a carbon tax is going to change the weather or allow you to control it. Having 3 bins for your garbage and putting all your products in the 3 individual bins as told, and then having them go to one landfill. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I know most Albertans and most Canadians and most people I talk to in most jurisdictions are frustrated the same way, that, you know, if we're going to have the ability to deal with our plastics properly, we should be honest about it. And that's why I'm proud of our government being so aggressive in relation to a net zero polyethylene cracker make net zero plastics, because then we can put this argument behind us. And, you know, 86% of plastics were landfilled in 2016. There goes your recycling programs. This represents, though, an opportunity, a $7.8 billion opportunity. And as I understand it right now, 4,500 direct full-time equivalent jobs are created in the province because of the existing recycling activities, with a further 1,600 indirect and 1,400 induced jobs, for a total of about 7,500 jobs. Now, you remember when I was talking about billions before, billions here, billions there, what does it mean? Well, jobs. It means jobs for Albertans, and good jobs, good paying jobs. And this is why I'm excited about this and the circular economy and what we can do on it. You know, plastics are not a toxic substance. Plastics are essential to our everyday life. We've grown to depend on them, and we have to find different solutions just than banning them. For example, and as you know, they help keep our food safe. Can you imagine if we didn't have plastics right now? They help with computer equipment, with personal protective equipment and medical supplies. I mean, they're absolutely essential. And I think where we're going as a province with our support of industry and industry driving here, it clearly says we're on the right path, because plastic is not the problem. Rather, the waste generated at the end of life must be managed appropriately. And the government of Alberta, in the interest of this, and industry continue to move forward with a true plastic circular economy, where responsibly managed plastic waste remains a valuable commodity to be reused or recycled, but not discarded, not to clog our ways. So, building upon Alberta's ambition to become a global top 10 producer of petrochemicals, we have to find a way to deal with those petrochemical wastes, and we are. And it's important. We need to keep them out of the natural environment, and we need to protect our environment, and we need to be first in the world at doing that, and we will be. And I believe we are. You know, as far as steps that the government of Alberta has taken to fight back against the federal government, nobody likes a disagreement, but, you know, when the other party is wrong, we need to make sure they stay in their lane. And as the Supreme Court of Canada has indicated in a couple of recent decisions, they have been wrong and they need to stay in their own lane. Alberta Justice has actually given notice to the Federal Appeal Court of our intention to participate in the appeal and make submissions regarding the constitutional questions raised by the Federal Government of Appeals. So that the Federal Court of Appeal has directed that the matter be heard by June 7th, 2024, so just a few months away. And we're going to continue to focus on more effective ways to reduce plastic waste, such as extended producer responsibility systems that seem to work well in Alberta, and that incent businesses to find new ways to recycle materials and reduce plastic waste. You also asked on, I think, plastics, the circular economy, and how it relates to the petrochemical development in Alberta. I think one thing we know with the oil sands and our conventional oil sector here in Alberta is that the international community has long fingers, and they're called the financing sector. And if that finance sector says they're not going to invest in Alberta for certain things, they're not going to. And that's why it's so important for us to lead and not follow. So global demand for petrochemical feedstock continues to grow, and driven by increased demand for plastic products. And with Alberta home to Canada's largest petrochemical manufacturing cluster, and with us intending to be, you know, one of the top 10 in the world, I would suggest that we need to be better at what we do, and we are doing exactly that. Now, you had a few other questions. I have 29 seconds left to talk about it. But I think one of your questions was in relation to well decommission?
No, tab 14.
Sorry. So many questions, so little time. The integrated resource management system. The ministries included in IRMS and how they work to achieve results for Albertans is made up of a network of key organizations, and I think I mentioned this in a previous.
Thank you, Minister. We will now go over we're going over to the opposition side to ask their 5 minutes questions.
Well, Minister, I just want to thank you for your commitment to the energy transition and carbon neutrality and diversification. I heard a lot of that today. So thank you for the public commitment to the energy transition. And just to update maybe your speaking notes, Razor Energy actually filed bankruptcy this month. So just for your information. I want to go to page... Anytime. So you can go to page 45 now of the Energy Ministry's business plan, and we see a quote, developing and implementing a regulatory framework for small modular reactor technology used in Alberta. Can you tell us more about this framework? In which area in the energy system do you plan to use SMRs? And have you done any economic analysis on these investments? The reason I'm asking is because of the recent news from the US. I'm not too sure if you're aware, but NuScale Power Corp, the first company with US approval for small nuclear reactor design, is canceling plans to build a power plant for a Utah provider as costs increase. The cost for NuScale project were climbing. The company said in 2021 it would deliver power for $58 a megawatt hour, but the figure has jumped to $89. That's 53% increase, according to a report from the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. The Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. So I'd like to understand if you have started doing economic modeling for investments in SMRs. When will the work on the framework be completed, and will the government share initial analysis with the public? I also want to ask you, on page 75 of government estimates, we see line item 4.2 stating the mineral strategy. In previous years, the fund budgeted under this line item was for the AER to develop new regulatory frameworks for geothermal and mineral resources. I'm assuming this is still the case. In the 2022 budget, it stated this was for 3 years, which would mean it ends this year. So will the work the government planned to achieve in 2022 be completed this year? Can we expect a comprehensive update? And how will the regulations address any potential conflicts between different industries that want to use similar reservoirs, such as pore space and mineral resources? And when will the industry have that certainty? What is the plan to fund regulating mineral and geothermal resources going forward? As you know, you've mentioned this, and you changed the ministry's name as well. One of the biggest opportunities for Alberta is the processing, upgrading, and refining of minerals. So, Minister, it's also in your mandate letter. It was outlined for you to develop an incentive program for these opportunities. So what is the status of all that? How are you making sure we're attracting these projects at a time where there is more global interest in these types of projects? Also, I'm not too sure if you know, but under the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, some mineral processing projects like anode or cathode active material production receive very significant incentives. So I'm curious, have you done any assessments on how Alberta can be competitive with these incentives that we're seeing worldwide and in the US? Have you talked to the federal government on bridging that gap? I have to say it's positive to see that there are companies interested in mineral resources in Alberta. The industry is still evolving and developing. In oil and gas, we have a mature, developed industry, but Alberta and Canada are not quite yet there on critical minerals. And potentially, our expertise in oil and gas could be further leveraged. So I'm curious, again, has your engagement included addressing this gap? Are you preparing steps for this fiscal year on that? We'll need to see the investments today because we need to plan for the future. I've heard this theme throughout the night. So I would appreciate the answers to these questions.
Very much. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and just, I just returned from PDAC in Toronto, where I had an opportunity to be at a mineral conference for prospectors and developers, and to share, with other ministers across Canada, some of the opportunities that we see. And of course, we see lithium as a real potential opportunity with our brine and the expertise that our men and women from our energy sector have extracted and have learned from through years and years of oil and gas extraction and other minerals. And, we have the expertise there, so I think we're going to see true advantageous opportunities for Albertans, no matter where they are in the world, not just in Alberta. But for Alberta itself, I think our opportunities besides lithium and maybe titanium and vanadium, really our opportunities are on the processing side. We're uniquely positioned to take advantage of our north. The Yukon, the Northwest Territories, they have amazing riches there that some have said there's no other place on the planet like it. So although, I do believe that we have some opportunities, our opportunities are really to take advantage of our neighbors and to process some of these minerals and special metals as time goes. But I listened to my partners in Saskatchewan and my co-parts in Ontario and other jurisdictions, and they're excited about what they have to offer, and they're going to use their competitive advantages to help their citizens, just like we're going to use our competitive advantages to help ours. And our competitive advantages are in our people, primarily in relation to this. They're highly educated, they have the expertise and experience, and frankly, they're going to be successful just because of that. But we aren't going to rest there. We're going to develop a series of opportunities for corporations to understand that if they want to invest in the processing and upgrading of those minerals, like Sherritt does with nickel out of Cuba in Edmonton, and other opportunities that exist, we're going to do it here in Alberta because it's worth it, apparently, to put it on a boat in Cuba, to ship it up to the East Coast and then send it by train and have it upgraded and refined and processed here in Edmonton because we're experts at it and we have the expertise and the equipment to do so. So I'm excited about those opportunities, and I think that no matter what it is, as long as we keep an open mind and we work in the best interest of Albertans with our partners across Canada, we'll be successful there. Now, you mentioned SMRs, and I can't help myself. I love SMRs because they represent an opportunity for us to get to net zero and at the same time take advantage of some of the natural things we have, like uranium and other things in Canada. They're a new and very versatile technology that could supply low carbon, low-cost energy in a number of different applications, including the oil sands, including electricity for Albertans and heat and steam, in particular for the oil sands and other major industries. And so I think just to let you know, first of all, that although we're looking at these and keeping an open mind to these technologies, this is a technology that we have to be very careful with. We have to make sure that Albertans are fully consulted and they understand what's going on. In Saskatchewan, there's a discussion going on right now, and as you are aware, the discussion is very lively in Ontario to the point where they're developing 4 SMRs on site now at Darlington. I had an opportunity to see that Darlington site and see that underway, and I'm excited about it. You asked about economic modeling, and I know there's been economic modeling that I've seen, by a variety of different governments and individual enterprises, but I will tell you that I don't have any for us in particular because we're not looking at investing directly in SMRs, in building SMRs and developing. That's not what we're looking at doing. That's a boondoggle waiting to happen. We're going to wait and see what Ontario does and how successful they are, and hopefully we can emulate some of that practice or take advantage of it. Same as our federal regulator, whether we go with a federal regulator or a provincial one, we're looking at that and exploring our options there to do what's in the best interest of Albertans. But as far as heavy-duty investments in SMR development, at this stage, I just don't see that being in the cards, especially given our marketplace. But SMRs, they'll be scalable, and they will help meet the energy needs of these facilities, especially if the oil sands operators want to go that way. There's a lot of heat and power to operate these opportunities up north. My ministry is deeply involved in planning for SMRs so that we can be certain that our SMR plan will include both electricity generation and industrialized decarbonization. But I'm excited about it. I had an opportunity to see the smart reactor, the SM1 in Korea. It's a really cool technology.
Thank you very much. We now have our final block from MLA Sinclair. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, and the rest of your staff for all your amazing hard work on this budget. So I am the MLA for Lesser Slave Lake. Minister Jean, it's an area you know, of course, very well. For a time in my life, you were our member of Parliament. And when we talk, I'm going to speak and ask a question about Section 7, Indigenous economic participation inside the budget, which is probably not a shocking revelation for some in the room that I'm asking an Indigenous question. But I would, when we talk about energy in our area, it is incredibly important to me. And I know you would have a deep understanding of that. You have family in my neck of the woods as well, and how important these job creators are and how much we support them. Even just recently, Tamarack Valley, which has one of the most prosperous oil plays with the Clearwater region in North America. And it is an amazing job creator, and it's a very important company. And I was very proud to provide remarks a couple weeks ago where we were announcing an AIOC deal with 12 First Nations and Indigenous and Métis communities to be able to give them a seat at the table. And we've done this through our AIOC program, through Minister Wilson and his amazing leadership there. And we are definitely grateful for that. And I just make mention of that because lots of times I feel like a lot of people use, we heard it here even today or earlier in the chamber, the word Indigenous has become somewhat of a bumper sticker buzzword answer. And to me, when we talk about deals like this is a truly meaningful deal. And I just want to mention some of the communities here really quickly. Peavine Métis Settlement, Duncan First Nation, Peerless Trout First Nation, the East Prairie Métis Settlement, Sawridge First Nation, Gift Lake Métis Settlement, the Sucker Creek First Nation, Capoeino First Nation, Swan River First Nation, Loon River First Nation, Whitefish Lake First Nation, and Driftpile First Nation. And I mention this because this is a truly meaningful deal for them. And they're becoming, along with our government, true partners in economic reconciliation. And you can imagine their surprise and how upset they'd be to hear our federal government talk about trying to kill basically our oil and gas industry when they finally have a seat at the table. So I commend you on your work, along with Minister Wilson, on making deals like this happen. And, just last week, February 27, 2024, Premier Danielle Smith and the Confederacy of the Treaty 6 First Nations renewed and reaffirmed their partnership. This was a historic moment in government-to-government relationships. The Energy and Minerals Ministry is committed to working with First Nations on energy projects. I can see that. Energy corridors and remediation work in their territories. And just before I get to my question, I think it's important to recognize that you yourself was also at this meeting, and I'm sure you're about to speak about it, where we were hoping the federal government would allocate the remaining $137 million. And just yesterday, Chief Cody Thomas, the Grand Chief of Treaty 6 Confederacy, and the Chief of Enoch Cree Nation, along with Chief Roy Whitney, Chief Ivan Sawan, all spoke in support of this idea. And I would like to mention that these are leaders who actually represent Indigenous people, as opposed to some people who like to volunteer to speak on our behalf. And they said it was important. Chief Thomas says this program's not only played a pivotal role in revitalizing our lands, but has also created opportunities for Indigenous contractors and First Nations across the region, which is, I think, some of the true ideas of reconciliation. So my question through you, the Chair, to the Minister, under Indigenous economic participation, key objective 1.3, it states that your ministry will enhance Alberta's investment climate and improve the province's standing with investors by working with other ministries, First Nations, Métis settlements, other Métis communities, and Indigenous organizations to support Indigenous participation and partnerships in energy, mineral, and subsurface economies, including regional development in rural areas. So what initiatives does your ministry have in 2024 to support this, is my first question. And then the the secondary one would be, similar wording has been included in numerous previous business plans as well. Can you please provide a couple examples of what has been achieved to date? And hopefully, if you have some announcements for my writing, that would be okay as well, Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MLA Sinclair. You have 3 minutes and 52 seconds to respond.
Great. Well, I have to tell you, I was absolutely honored to represent that area. You mentioned some Indigenous communities where I have family that were born and raised, and I'm excited to see what's changed over the last 40, 50 years in Alberta. I've seen people that lived in essence in cardboard shacks to now be millionaires, and I just saw an example of that in Fort McKay. A great announcement. Another announcement this morning. I mean, the wealth that's generated as a result of government policy for Indigenous communities in Alberta, frankly, the rest of the world should learn, and they are. Canada, the government has adopted it. Now Saskatchewan and BC have as well, and it's great initiatives. And, I think this is one of the best opportunities we have to say to the world, buy our oil and gas. We do it better than anybody else, and look at how we treat other Albertans. We do it better than anybody else. So I'm, first of all, very proud to be representing that area, and thank you for being here. I know I think you represent your people very well. Now, I will tell you a couple things that are exciting because I don't have much time, but I will say that we have a lot of opportunities right now in Alberta. Our Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program, $3.2 to $5.3 billion. There's an opportunity for Indigenous communities to get involved in that. We have right now the opportunity to safely develop carbon storage hubs, and proponents were asked to describe how these projects would benefit First Nations. So we're asking that question, and they have to bring about a plan if they want to participate in that. We were asked earlier by the opposition in relation to geothermal. Well, there are opportunities for Indigenous communities on the potential to help enhance energy and community resiliency for Indigenous and remote communities. During the time I was with the federal government, I had the honor of allocating $71 million to Mayo, the Yukon, to take them off of diesel. It was a joint project, and it saved the government about $9 million a year just on transportation costs. And it made a cleaner environment and brought hydroelectricity to Mayo, Yukon. Those are the kinds of projects that Indigenous communities can get involved in, and we encourage them to do so. To date, we've had AIOC support Indigenous communities in a number of areas. Of course, as you know, it's for natural resources, but it's also for agriculture, for telecommunications, transportation investments, to generate sustainable revenues and benefit over the medium to long term. That's what we're looking for, long-term return on investment. And, AIOC bridges the gap between Indigenous groups seeking commercial partnerships and their financial capacities. If they can't reach that point, AIOC is there to bring partners along. We provide loan guarantees to reduce the cost of capital for Indigenous groups and to support their ability to raise more capital to invest in those eligible projects. And have we had one bad project to date? No, we haven't. And we want to make sure we keep it that way, because we can have great projects that continue to give great investment to the people of Alberta in Indigenous communities, which they deserve. And it lifts all of us into a better place. To date, we've provided through AIOC $680 million in loan guarantees to 7 Indigenous communities. And in 21 seconds, I will say we've provided $93 million loans to facilitate 6 First Nations in becoming equity partners in Cascade Power, $27 million loan guarantees, Frog Lake First Nation to maintain its 100% ownership in steam-assisted gravity drainage. I'm sorry, member, but I've got 4 seconds left, and I got a lot left, but there's been a lot of money go out, and it's good.
Apologize for the interruption, but well done. But I must advise the committee that the time allotted for the consideration of the ministry estimates has concluded. I would like to remind committee members that we are scheduled to meet tomorrow, Tuesday, March 12th, 2024, at 3:30 p.m. to consider the estimates of the Ministry of Indigenous Relations. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.